Okay, show it's 1 o'clock on Tuesday, May 26, 2015, and we will go ahead and we'll begin the regular trustee meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have an agenda before us. Are there any additions, changes, modifications to the agenda?
Yes, board. I have actually three items to add to the agenda. Under administrator, last bullet point, joint meeting with the city of Beavercreek. And then at the end of the meeting, two executive sessions, 121.22G5 to consider matters required to be confidential by federal law, and 121.22G3 conference with an attorney for the public body concerning disputes involving the public body that are subject to pending court action. That's all I have.
Under old business, I'd like to add, just revisiting the EMS coverage at the soccer tournaments. We have Creek Classic this weekend, and then we have the Coosa tournament, and we have Haunted Classic that we need to make sure we have coverage for. Under new business, I'd just like to add discussion about advisory signage on Treybine Road. And number two would be personal use of township vehicles. Those two discussion points. Is there anything else to add from the departments? Seeing none, look for a motion.
What was that on Treybine?
Advisory signage on Treybine Road. I can
Move to approve the agenda as modified?
Second.
Ms. Graff.
Yes.
Mr. Paxson.
Yes.
Mr. Kratz.
yes.
Move to approve the payroll in the amount of $276,737.16.
Second?
Mr. Paxson.
Yes.
Ms. Graff.
Yes.
Mr. Kratz.
Yes.
Move to approve the bills in the amount of $148,406.16.
Second.
Ms. Graff.
Yes.
Mr. Paxson.
Yes.
Mr. Kratz.
Yes.
Move to approve the special meeting minutes held for May 11th, 2015.
Second?
Mr. Paxson.
Yes.
Ms. Graff.
Yes.
Mr. Kratz.
Yes.
Move to approve the regular meeting minutes of the meeting of May 11th, 2015.
Second.
Ms. Graff.
Yes.
Mr. Paxson.
Yes.
Mr. Kratz.
Yes.
Move to approve the special meeting minutes May 19th, 2015.
Second?
Mr. Paxson.
Yes.
Ms. Graff.
Yes.
Mr. Kratz.
Yes. At this time, we open up the podium to any citizens desiring to speak. Seeing none? Nothing? No words of wisdom for us? Seeing none, we'll close that open session and we'll go to old business. Mr. Ankeny approached me, and I believe Chief or someone from Fire has also had discussion, maybe Deputy Chief Dorston. They have the Creek Classic this weekend. They're looking for, there was some confusion as to whether things were settled or not as far as our coverage for those events. And I reminded him that when we had our last discussion with a representative from Ankeny Soccer Complex, the discussion was that there wasn't as much concern about the two Beaver Creek rooted tournaments, the Haunted Classic and the Creek Classic, but we had asked if there was any financial support that the Coosa tournament could contribute towards the coverage, and we gave them an approximate amount of what that cost would be. He was there going to go back and review that and come back to us, and apparently there was a disconnect in the communications because that message never got to Mr. Ankeny. Mr. Ankeny was under the impression it was settled, resolved, and we were providing coverage. And so with the tournament, the first tournament upon us, I just wanted to bring it up so we can either put a motion together to approve EMS coverage this year for those three tournaments or something different.
The short answer to this is there's two scenarios. As you already pointed out, Coosa is one, the Beavercreek based tournaments is the other. The Beavercreek based tournaments, as Chief Dorston, and he's run the project up till now, understands it, has been resolved. We will be doing the staffing for the event with on-duty crews. We will pre-stage them at the event, but they will not be dedicated toward the event. Therefore, if we got busy in another part of the community, we could pull the unit away, which is a little bit different in years past where there's been one dedicated for it. As such, there was also no recommendation for billing because those crews could be used for whatever they may need to be used for in the community, regardless. So we'll pre-stage a unit there. If they're needed, they'll be used there, and if they're needed elsewhere, they'll be pulled away in that scenario. So that is the understanding that we've been moving forward on, and that is locked in for all of the Beavercreek-based tournaments unless I get other direction from the board. The Coosa tournament, we are still waiting to hear back on what the cost sharing potential would be. So that has not been decided upon, but we have kind of the full range of options there. We could dedicate a unit. We could provide a unit just on an as-needed basis like anybody else in the community would call for it, or we could do something similar to the Beavercreek base where we pre-stage a unit but we're able to pull it away. So we have those same set of options available if necessary, but we have not heard back on Coosa. So Chief Dorson has spoke to Mr. Ankeny apparently recently, I don't know when recently was, to try and coordinate that final communication with the Coosa organizers, but they have not gotten the information back that we need for that yet.
Okay.
But we are set for the first tournament barring any
So
changes.
pre-classic is covered?
Yes, sir.
This weekend,
Yes.
regardless, okay. And so it would be my recommendation that we provide it for all three tournaments, for a couple reasons. One is, I don't think it would be worth the $1,500 or $2,500 contribution, to risk, the Coosa tournament looking elsewhere for fields to another community. Based on the economic impact the tournament does bring to the area. So, and it's, if you asked Circle K or you asked, I would assume Circle K would have the most local impact and site station. Those two facilities probably bank on that tournament coming in. And that's the closest. And then the rest of the community, as far as hotels and restaurants, also prospers, regardless if some of the benefit of it goes back to another community. So that's just my recommendation, is that we cover all three as we have in the past. And we ask for a contribution, but we don't mandate it.
Should we do it the same fashion that we're doing the other tournaments? Having an on-duty crew pre-stationed, and if they have to be pulled, they have to be pulled?
I guess I would suggest that you treat all three tournaments with the same manner, so that there's a standard we establish and an expectation that can be, that they can rely on, essentially. So,
And if they felt they needed additional coverage, they could approach us for providing that additional coverage.
but at least we communicate that to them so they know what their baseline is. If they need or want more, they can always. So, but in reality, even if you had one station there and you had a large event, you would most likely have to pull it anyway at some point. So.
Yeah, there's probably as good a chance as any. So
Right.
It's one of those where obviously we can't predict when the calls are going to happen. Some events they'll be there the entire time and not used at that event or any place else. Some events they'll be called away almost immediately and then be able to return later on in the day. We are not consistent enough in our call volume to be able to predict exactly if there would be an interruption or not.
The only other thing I thought about, and I think Mr. Paxton may have mentioned this before as well, but at these types of events is that, and it's difficult to ask volunteers to do more than what they're already volunteering for, but is there anything as far as either a volunteer base that could be supported by auxiliary there, that could help provide a Band-Aid, not literally a Band-Aid, but help supplement the cause, I guess. And maybe that's something we could work on this year.
Yeah, that's something I can definitely approach the auxiliary about, because they are looking for other areas where they can serve, and the CERT component would lend to that. The other thing is, well, I guess two other issues. One is the CERT folks aren't medically trained beyond like a very basic first aid, CPR component. So what they could do from a medical standpoint would be limited, although they could provide maybe some crowd support if there was water or cooling or other things like that. But then that ties into There's already trainers and some other folks at the tournaments as well that may be providing a duplicate service. So what we can do is we can reach out and see if there's, number one, interest in the auxiliary and helping support, and if there's a good fit for them, and we could pursue that through this year. And if there is, certainly we could start doing that.
That was what I was gonna mention is Kettering Health Network. They usually provide a tent
Right.
and a quick assessment.
Right.
Team.
Sports medicine is usually there.
Sports medicine, yeah. And then the fire department is sort of kind of work with, teamed up with them and use that way, but.
Okay. All right, so is the board willing to entertain a motion to approve EMS coverage for all 3 tournaments this year?
Move to approve the coverage as proposed by Chief Vandenboss for the tournaments.
Second.
And that is, just to
Discussion.
clarify, is the on-duty crew pre-positioned, but would be called off if needed elsewhere and come back.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be my, because it wouldn't be overtime
No.
necessarily. And I think the tournament requires that there's a medic there, if I recall. John saying something about the tournament rules or policy requires a physical presence of a medic.
I don't recall.
But not that when one leaves, another has to come in and stand by, but just kind of servicing the event, so to speak. So
Sure.
I think one park there on duty would probably suffice for that.
Okay. We can work from there, and we'll know when we get through this first tournament, if it becomes an issue, we can address it before the next one.
Absolutely. And
Okay.
then if I could ask,
Can they vote?
well, this
Or
actually I
does
think
it go-
goes to
okay.
the discussion of this. We have similar smaller events, and the 5K runs are probably the biggest other component where we get approached for this. We want to use a similar coverage for those where, again, pre-staged, on-duty, available for other calls, but just pre-positioned at the events. And then if they want a permanent site, then again, we talk to them about covering the cost of having a permanently allocated resource.
I have a question about the dispatch. If we have the unit there, will the dispatch be aware that whatever station is there would be like a last call?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
There's a specific status in CAD that basically takes them out of the normal rotation for dispatch, but keeps them available. So it'll use all of the other normally rotated units first, and then if it needs an additional, so in our case, we'd call the, say Medic 63, Medic 64, if 62 was the one down at the field, it would call 62 last, even though it may be an incident in District 62, it would pull from the outline before it called for them, but it would call them before it would call mutual aid.
Okay.
Satisfactory with me.
So to answer your question, I think the motion that was made was for these 3 tournaments.
Right.
I think in principle, what you're recommending is reasonable.
Okay,
So
all right, thank you.
if you can call, please. I'm sorry.
Ms. Graff.
Yes.
Mr. Paxton.
Yes.
Mr. Kretz.
Yes. Under new business, Treybine Road advisory signing. So I was contacted over the last week and a half by a handful of residents that live in the Stone Hill community. And this is the one up off of Turfland, I'll call it, on the west side of Treybine. So not the new development that's going in, but the kind of the original. I can't think of which subdivision that is. They were asking, and then I had one resident that has just purchased a home and moved into that home in the MI section. And all of them, I think they know each other, but they all ask the same question, which is, why is the speed limit 50 miles an hour on Treybine? We're pulling out of here. We've got kids that are possibly trying to go on a bike across Treybine from one side to the other without using the tunnel, which is there. And then also we have a new school that's down there. Can we get that speed limit reduced? What's the process? So I contacted Bob Geyer at the county. He was very helpful, walked essentially me through the whole process of how essentially a speed study has to be done. And it's really, even though it's a county road, it's not, the speed limit isn't dictated or governed by the county. It's actually, they do the speed study. They run that through an elaborate algorithm, which he shared with me. And then they pump all that information up to the state of Ohio. ODOT then comes back and determines the speed that essentially travelers on that road are comfortable traveling at. So if the speed limit is set at 50 and people are driving 60, ODOT is not going to lower that speed limit. And so the two ways to get that lowered essentially are, one, enforcement of the speed limit you have. He said that the last speed study was done in 2007 or 8. He referenced that as recent, even though to me it wasn't that recent, based on the number of homes that have been added since 2008, as far as the cross traffic going in and out of there. But what he did say, he said, you know, ultimately he doesn't believe, he said if the trustees make a recommendation for another speed study, he'll put it through and he'll run one. He does not believe that ODOT will lower the speed limit on that road. He says he believes 100% if it goes any lower, it might go to 45. It wouldn't go any lower than that, but most likely the speed of traffic is going to determine that it'll stay right where it's at. What he did offer, and he said does not have to go to ODOT, is if the trustees request that the county install advisory signage. These would be the yellow diamond-shaped signs, essentially, that warn, and he would put them on the north and south sides of those intersections, essentially. So as you're heading south and you're coming up on the Stonehill area, or you're heading north from Dayton Xenia, from that intersection, there would be an advisory sign that just warns you that there's an intersection coming up and suggests that you slow down to 35. He said it's unenforceable, but it may get some people to tap the brakes. And he said that's really no cost to the township, no cost to ODOT. He has the signs. He'd be glad to put them up. All we have to do is request it.
I think that would be our best suggestion. It really shocked me when I saw at one point on Trayvine, they have it actually down to 45. Because going way back, on a county road, 55 is the speed limit, and to get it reduced, you really have to be spitting blood and have a lot of accidents. So I think he's right. I doubt if they'll do anything. The trucks along there are going 50, 60, 70 miles an hour. So if they're comfortable going 70, they're not going to lower it to 40.
Right.
So I would suggest that we do the advisory signs and see if it helps someone.
It was purely, he said, just if we make the recommendation or make the request, then he will put them up. So what are your thoughts? Do you have any concerns with
No,
that?
I think it helps. It's tough to get out on Trayvine Road in the morning and then the evening, where it's rush hour traffic is coming from Xenia to try to get over to 675 or however you're going that way. That's like a main thoroughfare to me. And I notice it mainly in the morning because I live on Trayvine. It gets pretty hectic getting in and out of there. But I'm not opposed to signage. I mean, would it cause a liability anyway at all for the township? I mean,
No, in fact, if there was a significant accident there, it might at least be something to point to.
We're doing what we can within the limits of what we were able to do.
But yeah, it's like any additional
Right.
liability to the township.
the other thing I was thinking about maybe to support that would be like an accident study of that strip. I don't know if you can pull up how many accidents we had on that road, Dave, in the past 5 years or whatever, and then maybe that would help support something like a lowering of the speed limit. But
Straight.
it's a main thoroughfare.
According to Mr. Geyer, some of that actually goes into, ODOT does take that data and crunch. They look for minor, major, they have all different classifications of incidents on that road that they put into that algorithm, and then then the biggest contributing factor to that data crunch is they set up the sensors and they track how fast are people driving. And bottom line, even if the data supports lowering it, if traffic is driving on a regular basis at 55 or above, they won't. He said that's what happened the last time. So it was just I don't know if we need anything as far as a motion, but a recommendation to have the administrator just draft a letter to the county engineer to request that.
Sure.
I would ask if you're gonna do it. I would also do it for the MI home development, because
To
that is
include that.
building out very quickly.
Yeah.
And actually, we're pushing for them to do the road widening there before they even start the next phase.
Okay. So to include from south in between the new MI rent, which is what, Turnberry, or what's that road?
Sunbury, I think.
I think it is, but essentially between the MI development entrance and Dayton Xenia, and then on the north side of Stonehill as well, probably in between Conservancy and Stonehill, or whatever makes sense.
Are there
He offered to
signs,
do it on the north and south side, just advisory.
are there any signs that they would have saying, tell you, those intersection ahead, telling you what they are, so they're sort of informative?
He would put the name of the upcoming intersections. He
Okay.
offered to do that as well, the intersection signage, incorporating it with those advisory signs.
So I think if we'd ask for those major access to the various plats, if we could have a sign saying such and such is coming up, that would be better just than saying there's an intersection ahead. At least if
Right.
people are looking for them, they can find them and they can slow down before they get there.
Okay. Do you need anything as far as a formal motion, or you're good with the recommendation? Okay. All right. Second question was, or second discussion topic I wanted to bring up was personal use of township vehicles, meaning vehicles being taken home by employees. So from a fiscal office standpoint, do we or do we not have right now, do we report any of that as on their W-2?
No.
Okay. And do we have the obligation to report that on their W-2?
That was one of the recommendations from the last audit moving forward.
Okay, and why haven't we done that then?
We have contacted a couple firms to come in to get the legal as to how to determine the actual amount to be taken off the W-2, but we haven't hired a company to do it yet. It is an ongoing project that we are looking into, yes.
Okay.
As early as of last week, Mr.
Okay.
Garon's been working on it.
Okay. Who have we contacted? What company?
We talked, Manning and Manning, I know was the first.
They're like a consulting that'll crunch the data, or what will they provide?
Well,
Because we
through
don't
audit,
track.
we need to know, we can't just say, we determined that we're gonna dictate $20. I mean, I don't wanna be the one to determine that. I wanna be able to make sure that we're following the law as to how we determine
Okay. Do we require mileage reports?
what. Not currently,
Have we ever?
not to my knowledge.
Okay.
But we do know where their place of work is, and we do know their residence. So that would determine the mileage that they would be probably that they should being use it if it's not for personal use, just for having it available if they need it for work. That's the mileage that would be expected. And I don't know if you would charge them the 55 cents or whatever it is that we would get reimbursed, however, but that would at least we know how many miles that should not be exceeded in the ordinary use of the vehicle to and from residence.
If you remember correctly, during the exit conference, there were several items that the state auditor's office recommended become a taxable fringe benefit according to IRS rules. It was cell phones, it was uniforms, it was a lot of other things. I do have Manning and Associates working on interpreting the IRS rules on what exactly is technically a taxable fringe benefit and what is not. I know there was a loophole in the IRS ruling years ago that if you had a safety sensitive vehicle with lights and sirens and you're required to respond, it wasn't considered a taxable fringe benefit, therefore you didn't have to. So we do have Manning Associates who performed our audits a couple years ago, working on interpreting what the IRS rule, and I have sent them the recommendation from the state's office, and she is currently working on what she considers to be actually the amount that's a taxable fringe benefit. So we will work on that, and as long as we get it done and on the W-2 by the end of the year, then we're fine.
Do we have an ongoing contract with that?
How will you know if you don't ask them to take mileage? How would, just specifically for mileage, how will you know?
They have to determine which cars are actually going to be a taxable fringe benefit. There may not be, since actually the road workers do respond from their homes to high water and things like that as well, so they may be able to consider all of it not a taxable fringe benefit as far as the car. Now the cell phone and the uniform allowance, that's a different story. Uniforms, if they can be worn outside of the employment, would be considered taxable fringe benefit. So they are determining the rules on all of that. And so I did turn over all of the state's findings to them, and they are interpreting the rules for us. And no, Ms. Graff, we don't have a contract with them. They said they would look into it, and if there was anything they needed to do, that they would just bill us for it.
When do they think they'll have an answer back? Because we've been talking about this one for like a year.
Yeah, I realize that. Well, it was in the exit conference of the last audit, and as long as we have some kind of a rule for the next W-2, then we comply with the audit. I don't think that we're going to have a liability when it comes to taking vehicles home. There's very few of them, and most of them are safety vehicles. There's only a handful of vehicles that go home that aren't really a safety vehicle. So the issue with the car didn't seem to be a concern for them. It was the uniforms and the cell phone allowance that may have to be a taxable fringe benefit as a non-employee compensation on the W.
Okay.
We are actively working on that.
Okay. Administrator, is there any other discussion on that? Administrator?
Thank you, Board. On page 3 of your packet is a support letter for the US 35 project. One update since our last discussion 2 weeks ago is we did confirm the final cost for right-of-way acquisition for local jurisdiction at $800,000, with $700,000 of that being contributed by the city of Beavercreek for their project, or their project would count towards that. That would leave $100,000 left, and the county is asking Beavercreek Township to fund, and they will fund as well, $50,000 to make up that $100,000. So they're asking the township to fund the $50,000, and the county would then contribute $50,000 as well to make the grand total $100,000 or $800,000 for the project. What is happening this week is that the county is completing the tract application. Now, any amendments or any other additional support letters that can come in, the state agrees that we can file those at any time. So if there's any other businesses that would support the project, or any additional information that may come up before September or October timeframe when the tract advisory council meets, we can offer those amendments. What you find on page 3 is just a brief history of the US 35 project in the letter. Some statistical data when they completed North Fairfield and US 35, and then describing our partnership as well as some of the plans for the township moving forward with this project.
Okay. A couple of questions that we had when we discussed this at the last meeting. One is the right-of-way acquisition is projected or estimated at $800,000. What if it comes in at $1.6 million?
I posed that question to the county administrator, and it is his belief that anything above that would have to come back to the county as the sponsors of the project, and that the state would have to pick up that difference.
Okay. And then one of the other things we asked was from the finance office is where the funds could be allocated from.
I'm assuming you talked to your administrator. I haven't been asked that question.
No, we asked you at the last meeting.
I don't remember that.
Okay. Yeah. No.
And the only
It
place
was-
you
no,
can
'cause
take it
right,
from
when we
is general
finished,
fund.
and I think you said
can't
that.
take it from
Right.
anywhere. Okay, then
But
if
yeah,
you
that
wanted
was-
something more specific,
Meaning, yeah, where do we allocate the funds from if we? That was the last thing we said is if we choose to do it, where does the money come from? And I think you said you were thinking the same exact thing.
well, okay, if it's not anything different, there is no, you can't take it from any specialized fund where the monies are deemed just solely for that. I don't know if in some way you could go road, but that doesn't seem to be the right direction. You would have to go general
We can't
fund
take
and
it. We can't take it from road.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then-
Well, what we'll have to
You'd
do is
have to-
take it, if, for example, what we could do for, we do not have to show, for example, on the application, an actual bank account or line item in the budget. Now, I would prefer that, but what we have to have is a commitment from the township to fund it. Now, what we could do is, we are working on the tax budget, and we can create a line item for this and start allocating money towards that. And we do have money in contingency that we could move, as Ms. Aarons just said, to that line item. Now, when do we spend that money?
That was the next question
Yeah.
we had.
When do we spend that money is if the project gets approval. I don't think you'll see anything, and it's just, if they approve it for 16 funding, it would be late in 16 before they would ask for that commitment. If it doesn't get funded in this year's track, then
Deferred.
it's deferred.
I'm looking at this financial report, the status. We have almost 600,000 sitting in our land acquisition fund.
We looked at, and actually a conversation between Ms. Frick and I discussed that very topic, as whether we can allocate resources from that. And it didn't look like we can, because that money was actually set aside for land acquisition.
Say we can't or can?
Park.
Or
It was
improvement of
park.
park.
Or improvement of
Park,
parks.
yeah.
Isn't
Acquisition of parks or improvement of parks.
Because
That's it.
isn't
But
this
for improvement of parks.
buying right away, it's buying land, isn't it?
But it's not for
No,
park
no, it was
purpose.
But this was
acquisition of
specific to
parkland.
park
Yeah,
land,
specific to
that
parkland.
land acquisition fund.
Can we change that in any way, the land acquisition fund?
No, we could eliminate the fund, the money would then go back into general fund.
Then we
And
would-
then
Create another.
So there is a way to have access to it.
Yeah, we would have to
For the $5
eliminate
million.
that fund totally,
Okay.
and then reallocate those funds back to the general fund.
Well,
And then if you needed that fund again in the future, what's the complexity of?
create another fund.
We can spend money from the general
You can just
fund
recreate
directly
it
for
and move
parks
on.
at any point.
Okay.
The money essentially started out from an estate tax. We then bought the Gossiger property. And when we sold the Gossiger property, the money was put into this park fund because it came from the sale of a piece that we had set aside for parks. And so we wanted to make sure that when it was done, that there would be funds to buy additional parks. So we did buy from that fund the parkland on the southeast corner of the township.
Okay,
And this is what the residue from that, but we had.
right, the fund is, right.
Now, if we did eliminate the fund, we could allocate that money in the general fund within the line items and deem some of it to be for parks, which we do have a park section in the general fund. And then if the board would choose, we could put some money into a line that would be identified for right-of-way acquisition or US 35.
Okay, but again, funding that is not gonna occur until track approval and
Approves it.
track funding.
Right.
And then we pair up with the track funding.
That's right.
In whatever fiscal or calendar year that's gonna end up being.
That is
So,
correct.
And if there is a gap in between, what the projected right-of-way acquisition cost is and what the actual is, it'll be resubmitted for either additional funding, and at that time, each community can choose to participate or not participate
That's
based on
correct.
what that's gonna be.
Yeah, they would first go back to the county since they are the applicant.
The only reason I ask that is I've had one car dealer tell me he wants more than that for his land. Okay,
Okay, that goes
That full
to
amount, yeah.
right.
negotiation.
Th- this would be-
When that ends up in negotiation,
Yeah.
then that number changes.
Right.
So,
The 800,000 is just the local jurisdiction match of the overall right-of-way acquisition, which
Of
is
that.
projected
What's
at
estimated?
$1.2 million.
right,
So yes, if there is a landowner in the area who says, no, I want
right.
that full amount, then the state's gonna have to come back to the county as the applicant, and then the county will have to have discussions between the city of Beavercreek ourselves.
There's experts in that field. I mean,
Yeah.
these folks are looking at future lost earnings. so,
Right.
Okay. And the 3 to 5 year disruption period. Okay. The meeting at the township or at the county was, it looked like it was a good meeting as far as a good introductory and people getting to know each other. Not all dealers were represented there. Okay, so you're looking for a motion to approve this letter?
Yeah, I have, yes,
Or
and
you
you
have
have
a
to
letter
sign
for
it
us to
as
sign
the three
as a resolution?
trustee. Yeah, and then there's 2 attachments to the letter, which was also in your packet, because we make reference to it as the rezoning of the land for Valley Springs, and then the discussion of the Ohio Public Works Commission grant that the board had given us permission to move forward with for fiscal year 2016. So both those are attachments. So,
Okay. When is the meeting scheduled for the highway overlay? Where we talked about at the county meeting with the car dealerships,
Yeah,
but specifically for all the stakeholders involved?
Yes, first of all, just to give you an update, we have identified all the stakeholders in that area that we talked about previously in the highway overlay district. So essentially, if you want to take Dayton, Xenia, south to the northern edge of the developments, and like Country Club in the north and so on, that would be the overlay district. We have identified every business owner in that. We do have a letter being prepared to ask to schedule a stakeholders meeting for the highway overlay district on July 8th here in the community room in the basement of Station 61. One of the things that I made clear to at least the car dealerships is we have a basic idea or outline of what an overlay district should look like, but we want all the businesses to solicit and bring any ideas to the table to have some buy-in in creating this overlay district within they're going to do business in. So we're talking everything from signage to setbacks that would be different than other areas within the township. So, and then that would go to the zoning commission once we have text, because there would be a text amendment to our zoning resolution. They would approve it, make any modifications or suggestion on changes to the township trustees.
When are you projecting for that meeting?
July 8th.
July 8th.
Yes,
Okay.
July 8th.
What time?
I believe we sent it for late afternoon.
Okay.
And you'll notify us when the meeting will take
Yeah,
place.
I'll confirm. Yeah.
That's okay. The 4th is on a Saturday. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Or Friday?
July 4th is a
It's
Friday.
Friday.
Okay.
Thought it was a Friday.
Saturday, the third is a Friday.
Third is Friday.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So it's the following week. So
Yes,
it should
it's
be a
following.
good weekend for everybody. Okay. Okay.
So there's a letter for you to sign. Should be on the back of the first page, plus the two
Attachments.
attachments as well that will be sent to the county. That will be a part of the overall application.
You need a motion, move to approve the letter, the draft letter to the Ohio Transportation Review Advisory Committee to support the county's application for tract funds.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I had a question. And here it says the township will be exploring funding options with the Public Works Commission to complete several access road upgrades that will be needed as part of the project. Is that an expense the township is going to have to take on?
Yes.
Okay, so that's additional expense other than what we're spending.
That's right.
on that. So we
Now-
don't know what that is.
We don't know that because in the special meeting, as the board had indicated to staff to go ahead and explore that option, we don't know what that cost is. Now, the engineering cost, which is to any project that we would do, the road project, is already been taken out of the equation because the state's already done the engineering study. So we'll be able to use the engineering study part of the application and see what the overall cost is to do, like on page, the second page of the attachment is some of the access roads that were identified in the special meeting 2 weeks ago. Now, any funds that we contribute, so in other words, if we get the Ohio Public Works Commission says we'll fund 90% of the project, and then the 10% comes from the township, and we choose to go forward with that, whatever that cost may be, because we don't know yet. This will be counted in the next phase to our local match for construction.
The 100%.
Right.
The Public Works money plus our money as a total would then be a credit
That's
toward
Right.
the.
So anything we do in regards to the US 35 plan, any modifications that we do here locally will count to the overall project cost for local match.
And these are the surface, street changes, additions, modifications
Yes.
that we went through in the last meeting?
Yes.
So that would be in the next, okay.
It would essentially be the access road currently behind Circle K and in between the storage facility, gaining access because of the elimination of the Premier Lane Road up front to gain access to Premier as well as Tractor Supply. And then on the north side, it would be moving the Heller intersection just south of the collision center, and then those would be the two projects that we'd be looking at.
Okay. It's not, we talked about this just briefly, I think, at the last meeting when we went road by road or access road by access road. But one thing that's not highlighted in yellow is Premier Drive, which is currently a private road. And you might, I don't know if he's back to work yet or not, but if Larry Spicer or talk to the Arnolds as far as that road, because in previous meetings, Larry Spicer was adamant that if that road was going to be cut off, then it needed to become a township or county road as far as taking that road over. So what is involved in that, I don't know. You guys know, as far as if you were to convert that private road to either township or county.
Yeah, essentially,
Does that mean we have to buy it? Does it mean it's just granted to us and we take over maintenance of it? What does that mean?
yeah, we'll have to check on that because essentially we'd be looking from the access road, the new access road that goes between the storage facility and the gas station on the north-south, and then it turns into, from east to west, and then it turns into a north-south. The question is the road frontage that currently is not township road, that's private, between the new access road and Premier. Yeah, we'll have to look into that.
Yeah, really from Orchard all the way back to Premier's front door is what he was talking about, because you've got a section that runs in, essentially in between the highway and Circle K, in between the highway and Tractor Supply, and then in between the highway and Premier.
Yeah,
So
we'll look at
just,
that.
so that it doesn't become this red herring that's hanging out there that nobody thought about, and then all of a sudden you can't connect the rest of the dots.
That's correct.
So do we need a,
So
We
in
have a
essence,
motion.
we're committing here, we're committing to complete the
We are committing, in this letter, we're committing
to $50,000.
to $50,000, that's correct.
And also we're committing to complete the access road upgrades.
To
No,
apply
we're
for.
looking to explore funding options.
Okay.
Yeah,
to complete.
and so, and that's essentially what the board's direction was at the special meeting, was to explore that option. It may not be an option depending on the cost, but we don't know what the cost is. So, something that staff will be working on, exploring that cost, and working with ODOT's engineers that have already done the work in that area.
Yeah.
but correct me if I'm wrong, whether you do the special projects and apply them towards your local match, or you provide the local match, the local project would never exceed the amount of local match.
That's correct.
So it's just getting credit for something that you would do in advance to be applied later.
Yeah.
So,
And some of the discussions with the car dealerships is as much as this project we can get done before the major construction. So have all the access roads in place, and then allow the residents and commuters in that area that are doing business in that area understand the new roadways and how to get in, and make sure that there's appropriate signing for that. The car dealerships expressed they were pleased with that idea, as if we can get much of the smaller part of the roads, the access roads, the yellow brick interchange, Shakertown, and all that, so that people know there's other ways to get into the developments, or into the businesses, into the businesses before the overall bridge project starts.
You had, I mean, at the meeting, you had Jeff Schmidt there, you had the president of Superior, and they all expressed, their number one concern is the downtime while this project is going. If they could wave a magic wand and have it done in a year, they'd feel much better. But the concern that, it's the unknown they're afraid of. So how long is it gonna be disrupted? And that the longer it's a pain for people to get to their destinations, the few of them will remember how to get back.
Right.
So, and there's an open debate on whether car dealerships are a destination location or not. And at the end of the day, they've got millions of dollars invested to make them show places.
Yes. And some of the other topics that we're willing, as a part of the overlay district, is to identify and brand the area, much as we discussed in the past, as an auto mall concept. And one of my comments to the car dealerships were, is when we think of King's Auto Mall, everybody knows. Now, one of the things the car dealerships, one of the dealerships asked of me is to go down and take a look at and see the how King's Auto Mall set up and the challenges down there. So I'll be willing to do that as well. It's been a while since I've been down there. So,
Steve Sexton and Jerry Laughlin have already taken out the domain Beavercreek Auto Mall. The challenge is getting all of the players to buy into it, and then be able to cohabitate in one space without feeling as though one dealership is benefiting more from the marketing than the other one. So those are it sounds great. It'd be a lot easier if one guy owned all of them.
right.
That's not the case. So there's some challenges to overcome. So by supporting the letter, we are committing $50,000 towards the $800,000. If the $800,000 goes up, they'll come back to us. If the project isn't funded, we don't spend the money. We only spend the money when TRAC funds their portion of it.
That's correct. The next phase of the project.
Right. So, and then theoretically, we are saying that by signing on for the $50,000, we are signing on for the whole project, because we would never give $50,000 towards something we never intended to support in the long run.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So
Yeah, this letter is a commitment to the completion of the project
okay.
as a whole.
It would still be nice to know what the whole project's going to cost.
I agree, and as
Wave a
Mr.
wand.
Kretz, we've been at the same meetings when we asked at each meeting, and we have a different number that comes back. So,
Okay.
Talking with the county administrator, we're saying that this is our commitment, and that's what we're willing to put in the application.
Okay. Any further discussion?
I made one that might help, I don't know. The 5 at-grade intersections that you quoted in, it's in the second paragraph, toward the end, 40,000 vehicles per day plus 5 at-grade intersections. That's 5 at-grade intersections probably within inside a mile and a half. I mean, it's pretty congested, so, I don't know if that would help at all. I'm sure everybody's probably familiar with this area anyway, so.
The track members are very aware of this. This will be the 4th year in a row I know of that they've been presented with the same project. Now, we have come closer because the environmental, as I've been told by ODOT, it will be completed in June. And that's something that's been pushed off because the environmental study has not been completed. So when we're making these applications to track, it's not what we consider a shovel-ready program until the environmental is complete and the engineering. So we've got essentially the engineering portion complete. We're waiting to finalize the environmental study and that report, and that should be done, as I've been told by ODOT, should be done in June. So they should have at the very next track meeting a complete application with a new sponsor, which is the county, as well as letters of support and the environmental study, as well as a financial commitment from the local jurisdictions on right-of-way acquisition.
Any further discussion?
Ms. Graff.
Yes.
Mr. Paxton.
Yes.
Mr. Kretz.
Yes.
And board, if you'll sign it, I'll make sure it gets to the county administrator for the application.
Next item on the agenda, Rumpke.
Thank you, board. As you are aware, the county is no longer doing recycling for us. It ended earlier this month. Staff is exploring several options. One of the options presented by the county was to have each building within the township can handle their own recycling. This would require each of the offices to get one of the big bins with the wheels and once a week take it out to the curb. We had a long discussion at the department head level on that and then came up with a final solution that included just going to one location, one container, which will be located at the road department garage where there currently is one, but it's cardboard only. It's an 8 cubic yard dumpster, if you will, that is at the road department's facility. It will be replaced with the same 8 cubic yard, but it would handle all recycling as well as cardboard. And that cost is $53 a month to do the recycling. Now, one of the things that this will be cost allocated amongst the departments, but the road department is once a month going to go around and collect from all the facilities and transport it back to the road department and dispose of it in the new 8 cubic yard container. Now, one of the questions is, should we continue? And it is currently in the handbook now that we practice recycling throughout the township. But it's a question whether we move forward. Now, the blue bins that you currently see inside the buildings, the county is allowing us to keep those as a collection point to collect to whatever decision the township makes in regards to recycling. So
I think we should continue. I think it's a responsible action for us to take to encourage recycling at all times, to keep the amount of garbage going into the landfills. It's something we should be doing, and I think it's something we should be a leader in our township.
One of the, just to update the board, legal has reviewed it, reviewed the agreement. They had one suggestion of change. I did receive that today, which there would be an amendment. I'll share the amendment to you to number 6. That is currently in your packet on page 7. And the section in red there is what legal is recommending. Rumpke did agree to that. They cannot change by company standards the layout of the current agreement, but what they can do is an addendum. So if the board moves forward with this project and gives me the authorization to sign on behalf of the board, you'll see that on page 7 I'll sign that contract as well as the addendum that Mr. Paxton's looking at.
What does the addendum do?
Well, there's an indemnification clause within the contract, which we can't do. We suggested that it be removed. They weren't willing to remove it, so we put that it is only to the
red
extent of coverage and limits of any, I forget the exact name, insurance essentially.
And you have the other contract or whatever. Do you need a motion?
If the board would like, I don't have a motion for this, it was more of a discussion item. If we move forward, if the board wants to continue with recycling practices in the township, then I would just ask for a motion to go ahead and approve the contract, as well as the amendment, and authorize me to sign. I'll work with staff on the cost allocation. Currently, we do have a line item for the recycling, but there'll have to be potentially an adjustment made to cover the additional cost. I think the current cost is $37.
For trash?
Yeah, no, for the current
It's
cardboard.
$30. $30.62.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I don't know that we have a separate line item for recycling. I think it just comes out of Rumpke
Trash,
Yeah.
Rumpke trash.
Yeah.
So we may have to review and look at that to see if there's any changes.
will they still have the cardboard and this, or this will be one big where you just dump everything in?
Yes, this will be just one
Okay.
8 cubic yard container that handles everything, including cardboard. So right now, we just have a cardboard only.
Okay, well, they just changed the sign on the 8 cubic yard thing, and that,
General
but I
fund-
will move to
General fund
approve.
has always picked up that $30 bill for that cardboard container. I mean, it's been that way for
Yeah.
years.
Move to approve the customer service agreement with Rumpke for recycling at the $53 per month with the addendum as presented, authorizing the township administrator to sign for the township.
Second.
Ms. Graff,
Yes.
Mr. Paxton,
I just have one question.
sorry.
Obviously, you've talked about it, so that the work, the
Yeah.
extra work for you guys go around and pick this stuff up. You got a vehicle and you got the time to do this, and,
As long as it's bagged, and we discussed that, and there will be a,
yeah.
here's what you need to do at the station level and whatever, and we'll pick it up. Because we go around and do trash at the parks and everything once a week anyway, so.
Oh, all right.
Anything
That's all
else?
I have.
That's it.
Okay. Ms. Graff,
Yes.
Mr. Paxton,
Yes.
Mr. Kurtz.
Yes.
And you'll be able to separate the trash from the recycling when you're picking them up.
Employee timekeeping policy?
Thank you, Board. Starting on page 8 is a draft policy for the employee timekeeping. This has addressed the current software that's in place, OSL. It matches the formats that you've seen before on all new policies. This just solidifies the use of the software that we're currently using. And it does have some items in there if we choose to move forward with any time clock system or biometric, it's addressed in there. But as discussed, we're taking this project in baby steps in regards to making sure that we're still doing the old way and the new way, and making sure that the calculations are correct for both on the timesheets and then what is presented in the timekeeping software. And then if we move further down the road, with additional equipment, for example, biometric or punch clocks, it allows this policy allows for that use. One of the things that's also addressed here that is staff when requesting overtime, which is part of OSL and what we're tracking, is that they have to fill out the overtime register and project register, which they have to do now. It's defaulted to if you put in for an overtime request, or instead of overtime comp time, it requires you to put a reason for that overtime, and we also included the appropriate budget code so that not only we can track it, but since we're talking and implemented cost allocation to a limited part of some operations within the township, we'll be able to track that as well. Any questions on the policy?
No, just as far as enforcement of the policy, you covered that in your disciplinary actions. And this will go into the new format employee handbook, essentially as a policy slip insert.
Yes.
Essentially.
Yep. So if there's any modifications, if we
And so
change softwares or we change practices in regards to timekeeping, this policy be reevaluated and then resubmitted for approval.
Okay, so does this mirror what you're currently doing with OSL?
That's correct. But
Okay,
we're,
so we're not changing anything, so the current employees are all aware of this, and
Yes.
new hires would have to be oriented
yeah,
to
so
this.
this just makes it a policy for the township on the usage of it.
Okay,
And, there's a lot of change in here, I see.
Well, this is a whole new policy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a lot of questions about this. I have a lot of problem with it,
On the OSL?
on this policy, is that's where you're at. Am I reading this right? Employee timekeeping?
Yes.
do we wanna make a motion to approve it and then go into discussion on it?
That's fine with me. Move to
There's a
approve
motion to pass on it.
the policy for employee timekeeping as proposed. Section 3, number 2. That's what you,
Right.
Second.
Discussion, okay. Fire away, please.
Yeah, to start with page 9, employee exempt salary. In this section, you have, basically, it's not covered by FLSA, but, maybe I'm reading it wrong, does not, receive either pay or could. We're not calling a salaried position here, taking compensatory time and moving overtime. We're not
That-
saying that right there, are we?
No, that's in the next
Okay, I wanna
policy.
make sure we're not saying that right there, just was rereading that, that's one.
That's just the definition of each classification.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, for example,
Carried over from
in
page
that section on page 9, it would be the exempt employees, the salaried employees would just be submitting time off requests. So that would be vacation or comp time currently. So our salaried employees earn comp time hour for hour, which in my next policy, I'm recommending that we eliminate, but that's next discussion.
Okay. And timekeeping systems and devices, under policy number 2, timekeeping system and devices. The township will utilize OSL solution software as the official timekeeping system. So we're making a change over to them tracking vacation leave, comp time. Are you including that all in the time, in the
Yes,
timekeeping
that-
system?
That's right. The goal was to eventually, when we feel comfortable that the timesheets and OSL is accumulating all the leave correctly. So for the last 2 pays, we've been checking. So we're still requiring the employees to do the old system and the new system. So we're actually requiring them to duplicate their effort right now. But the idea is to move to the technology side of it, to OSL.
And is that going pretty good right now? Tracking, are we on target with that?
We do have some calculation things that we worked out. We just worked out today one calculation issue and a authorization issue. That's been taken care of today. So yes, we're still working through the bugs.
We're not there yet.
Yeah,
But
we're not
we're
there
working.
yet. But this policy just confirms that the employees have to use OSL. And we'll be able to track, the projects, we'll be able to track the cost allocation, and we're ensuring that. There was something that was switched by the software company. We went back and switched it. It was just a calculation error that was taken care of in regards to cost allocation. And it was hours. It wasn't vacation leave or sick leave, it was tracking hours. So for example, if a maintenance employee worked 8 hours in the fire department, then that was being tracked. What happened last week, it was coming up for the full day, so it was showing that it was including breaks, the employee was working, so that would have been the 8.5. So that's been taken care of and changed back to the way it was. So we're still working through some bugs. My recommendation is that we're gonna probably go one more pay cycle and evaluate and see how that's working, till eventually where we're just doing OSL, period.
So is there a check and balance system in place, for this? Say there's an overpayment, underpayment. Is there a way to backtrack that once it's entered in there to try to nail down where the mistake might have been made, or, in other words, you mentioned something in here about a supervisor doing a data entry, checking it on
On a daily basis.
what I did on a weekly basis on a Friday? Maybe
No,
that's
that's the final payroll.
The final
Yeah,
payroll,
that's the
so-
final payroll. And that has to go, so for example, any time off, any overtime requests, any comp time requests, or deductions from comp time, Sick leave requests, vacation, personal days, EDOs, all have to go through a system of approvals, okay? So, for example, if one of the department heads puts in for time off, then that authorization comes to me, it's file stamped. When I authorize that time off, it is then file stamped and put into the employee planner. So you can look at, in fact, I can look at the employee planner for the whole year and tell you who's gonna be here, who's not gonna be here, on the vacations that already been approved.
Let's say somebody took sick leave and they forgot it never got entered in there. And it got caught later. They got caught later. Hey, you weren't here that day. You were sick, remember? Well, you know, is there a system in place to recoup that day? I guess is what I'm saying. If somebody forgets.
If we
to enter
discover
in-
an error, yes, yeah, we can recoup that. One of the provisions in here is if there is a payroll mistake, that we are allowed to correct it.
Are you asking, Mr. Paxton, are you asking within the policy or within the software?
Well, the policy, I think, should have checkpoints into it
Okay.
itself,
I just-
on people.
Yeah, I didn't know if you're asking the capability of the software, if it has the ability to recoup, to do a manager adjustment later in a future pay period.
I would assume
And it
that
does.
would, I mean, that would,
And
yeah.
so then the question on the policy then is, do you have those checks and balances? And some of those are outlined like in 3.1.
I've read that, yeah.
So,
Right. There, and allows that. So yes, the software will be able to do it. If someone calls off sick, there's two options. Now, what I've put in the policy is that it's to be done daily. So if you contact your supervisor, regardless of the department or employee, then the supervisor will be able to go in and click what we call a book off option. And that book off then will be put in. So for example, if they're calling in sick for the entire day or work schedule or shift, you can click on it. Now, let's say the employee feels better, comes back to work, then the employee shows back up to work, then the supervisor can then go in and make that amendment and that change, and it will be tracked that way. And it's file stamped every time. It does, for example, if a department head or any employee puts in for a leave request, it sends an email to the supervisor that says you have a transaction waiting for you. Once you log in, so for example, if a department head today puts in for leave, which we have one today, it'll come up as a transaction. I click on it, I authorize it, everything's file stamped, time stamped. If I make any adjustments to it or any changes to it, it will be file stamped as well. Now in the future, what we're seeing, one thing that OSL is looking forward to, as one of their amendments and changes, is to have interaction with Outlook and SharePoint at some point. So if I book somebody off, or a supervisor books all the way off, and then it automatically puts that onto a calendar, shared calendar feature in either SharePoint or Outlook. So that's down the road though, but those are some of the things.
Okay. So if an employee doesn't get their time in, and the payday comes and goes, did they just miss it, or is that, oh, I forgot to put it in there and then put it in on the next payday, because they didn't work within that payday, then?
So if it's a leave request and it was not tracked properly, then yes, then that will be charged and we can go back and charge them for that. If it is an overtime request, and that's why the policy says it needs to be evaluated by the supervisors daily, is so that we don't miss those. We don't want to wait till the end of the pay period and authorize all these leave requests or overtime requests. Is to be done daily. If, for example, someone forgot to turn it in, and now this policy puts a lot of responsibility on the employees to ensure that they are putting in their overtime requests. Okay, we've authorized the overtime. So, for example, a firefighter calls in sick, it drops us below our minimum manning level, and we call in 2 firefighters to work let's say 12 hours each to make up for that 24. It is incumbent on the employee that they fill out the OSL request before they leave to get it approved. Now, if they forget to do that, we still by law, are obligated to pay that overtime. So if it does get missed by the end of the pay period and they submit it next pay period, it has to be authorized. But as you can see on section 4, they're subject to some discipline.
I guess my thought there was fleece overtime. If somebody didn't work in its cycle, and
Oh, it tracks all that.
you know what I'm saying, but if they didn't do a data input
Right.
and they got overtime because I'm just saying a mistake, so they're fault. Now that the checks are out, so now
Yeah. It would be,
there was
yeah.
a data entry error. So now we're in and out of that cycle into the next one, and there's a mistake in that cycle. So
Yeah, and we
it's
would,
just handled
the software would
right
be
now.
able, I'm sorry, the software will have the ability to go back and make that adjustment. So if we do have to make any adjustments, we can do that.
Okay.
Much like we did with the 2-year look back.
Any other questions? Any questions, Ms. Gray?
No.
I did. Under your disciplinary action, you said they'll be subject to disciplinary action up to including termination, but you don't go into any details. Are you referencing another portion of the handbook, or is that something that you're going to, how do you know what that is? How does an employee know
That's it.
what the discipline's gonna be?
That goes to the discipline section of the handbook.
You might wanna add that so they know. That's, you know, you don't want any employee to say, well, I didn't know that that's what you meant, or that's where it was. They know specifically, if I do this, then this is the consequence.
Well, what we currently don't do in our handbook is reference back to, you
other
know, we just
policies?
say you're subject to discipline. Management determines what level of discipline. So if we go back to the discipline section, so let's say we have someone who falsifies or misrepresents their time and attendance information, you know, is this a first occurrence, is this a second occurrence, is there a pattern here of other discipline? All that has to be, and that goes back to the other discipline policies.
Okay, that was just a question.
Yeah.
But Ms. Aarons has a good point, though. If this is an insert into a new manual, you can't leave it to interpretation if this supersedes a previous.
This doesn't supersede,
It doesn't say it does, and it doesn't say it does not.
I can see that, but the current, this is an essentially new policy.
Okay.
So it would be much like what we have done with the policy, the handbook that we're changing, policy by policy and reviewing by policy based on the
Okay.
HR recommendations.
Okay.
But this gels with our current handbook?
Yes.
Okay, that's the number one thing I think.
In the
we were trying to
definition under
ask,
discipline.
correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I wasn't sure.
Okay, there's a definition here, and it says an action taken against an employee by a supervisor or management as a result of an employee's lack of adherence to the rules and procedures of the organization and the community.
And that's correct.
Is that the assumption
Yeah.
that the discipline that we already
Yeah.
have, so that's
And that's
in the
currently in our
definition.
handbook. Yeah, these definitions are currently in the handbook. The only modifications that I've made to some of the definitions is adding salary and hourly. So, because there's always confusion as to what's exempt and what's non-exempt, what are the differences. Now we spell it out. Exempt employees are salary employees, non-exempt employees are hourly.
HR, any commentary? Okay.
And I'm also to say that the next policies, all the recommended changes by HR, also included anything that's in the HR audit have been included in the policies, and any recommendations from legal have been made to these, and these are the final drafts.
So at this point, we're looking for a motion to.
There's
We
already
already have a motion.
Yeah.
Been a while.
Yep, if you're finished with discussion, I can call roll.
Okay, cool.
Ms. Graff.
Yes.
Mr. Paxton.
Yes.
Mr. Kretz.
Yes. All right, overtime compensation policy.
Thank you. On page 11 is the overtime compensation policy. Same format as all our new policies are going to be, as recommended by the HR consultant. This is essentially incorporating some of the language that's in our current policy. There is one typo I'd like to point out on page 13 of your packet under section 2, comp time, non-exempt hourly employees. Employees may carry over 40 hours of comp time from one calendar year to the next. As you recall, that's in our current
Not getting
policy,
page
it's
13.
24 is what the employees are allowed to accumulate. So that's a typo. We're not limiting them to 24 and then carry over 40. So,
If, maybe if you can, key in on, and same for the next policy as well, what's different in this policy versus what we currently practice?
Sure. On essentially page 12 of your packet, after the definitions, which just include the definitions I discussed before, essentially everything here is on that page, essentially in our current policy, and with a
So
few-
1.1 to 1.8 mirror our current policy?
I can't say that as 100%, but yes, I believe that it is currently in our policy. The only changes that I will point out will be essentially in 2 that I already pointed out, and 3 once we get to that point.
Okay, so in 2, are you saying that is it 2.?
2.3 should be 24 as opposed to
Okay,
40.
so you're not recommending the change to 40, you're
No.
saying that the document should reflect 24, it was a typo.
Correct.
So that would have to be, 2.3 would have to be amended.
Yeah.
And then, so in.
But that is new. In the current policy, there's nothing that, other than it says on carryover, there's really nothing that addresses how much you can carry over. What the board has identified in the current handbook is that we cap the battalion chiefs at 40 and all other employees at 24. And I did review this with legal that in regards to the amounts, the law clearly says we can set the amounts in regards to limiting how much comp time an employee has
I'll have
in
to
the
share it to you,
works.
because mine's not working. My mic.
Your iPad?
My iPad stopped working. I lost
Battery die or?
the meeting.
We'll pass it up.
Yeah. Thank you. What I was looking up is the definitions. I figured you would have had, you go this way and this way. I figured we'd have the same definitions. Okay. Okay. Each one does it differently. Is there, but there's no discipline under this particular section.
There's nothing cited in regards to discipline
Okay.
in the document.
Because it would be, if it were calculated incorrectly,
Oh, thank you.
intentionally or unintentionally, it'd be addressed in the previous policy.
That's correct.
Okay. I'd like you better.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Uh,
No, it isn't here. Page 13 isn't here. 12 is here, 13's not.
See if 14's there.
14's not there, 15's not there. It stops at 12.
1.3.
Dan's talking about 1.3.
Okay.
All paid benefit, leave hours shall be included in the total of hours worked to determine overtime hours, but in no event shall an employee permit overtime. All right, so, what overtime you talking about there? 40-hour overtime, or you talking about police overtime?
Any overtime that they're available to. So yes, so it would include FLSA overtime as well as scheduled or unscheduled overtime.
So, I know we talked, I'm having a problem comprehending here, we talked about all these benefits going into the hourly rate for police overtime. And we're also using that for the 40-hour overtime rate as well?
Yeah, we currently have to do that for all overtime and calculate it. So for example, when we're talking about some of the bonuses, when we're talking about FLSA overtime, we made those adjustments in OSL, for example, for roads department employees for longevity and
Wellness.
wellness.
Okay, so they're getting the holiday pay and the.
Well,
and the
so
bonus
set,
at the end of it?
except sick, injury, and holiday hours.
Okay, so that, alright. Okay, so you're talking about, longevity
Mhm.
and.
Any bonuses that they receive have to be calculated into FLSA overtime.
Okay. Now, 1.14, so the non-exempt hourly employee work on an actual holiday, they should be paid for the hours actually worked at 1.5 times their base rate. So are we paying them for the holidays now that they work plus the bonus check at the end? Is that what this is saying?
No, that's not what that's saying. What
Alright.
that is saying is if an and then remember, as you go back to the beginning of the policy, when you talk under references, okay, and applications, any agreement that's currently in place with any of our workers, okay, whether it's our road department or our union employees and local 2857, this will supersede anything that's in this policy. This is for anyone who's not covered under an agreement.
Okay. Okay, just wanted to clarify that.
Yep. Now, on number 3, this is where we changed a few things, and I'm recommending to the board on changes. When we're talking about salaried employees, and this kind of goes to the next policy as well, we are treating our salaried employees currently essentially as hourly employees. We are requiring them to keep accurate times in and out, record all hours over that they work in the excess of the core hours that have been established by the township. And we have, in my opinion, and I think legal would agree, and I think we've seen some previous things from discussion in regards to FLSA, is we potentially have a claim of a salaried employee to say, I'm no longer a salaried employee, I'm an hourly employee. And so to address those issues there, you'll see 3.1, 3.2 addresses those issues, except for our 3 salaried employees that are assigned to a 24-hour shift. And what I'm recommending there is we increase their hours from 40 to 48, so that gives them at least 2 shift days off. Right now we're saying it's 40 hours, and that's up to the board, but I'm recommending we increase it to at least 48 hours that they can accumulate. And those will still remain for the 48 hour, so the 3 battalion chiefs, that would still be for 1 hour for hour on a basis. So they would not be calculating much like we have to for hourly employees at 1.5 times. This will be 1. The other recommendation is that we start treating our salaried employees as salaried employees, and as such eliminate the fact that they accrue comp time. So what you see is on page 14 of your packet, or page 4 of the policy, 3.5, exempt employees may not accumulate additional comp time after, if it passes today's date, but they'll have to use all unused comp time by the end of this year.
So you proposed a definitive cutoff time, but then it won't expire until.
Yeah, so if the policy passes today, they will be essentially not be subject to comp time, okay? And then that goes to the next policy, which is flex time, which is something that we've discussed for quite some time. But there's a cutoff, so they would not accumulate any additional comp time as of today, for example, if it passes. And then any comp time that they currently have in the books have to be used by the end of this year. So if they were planning on using it for time off later on, in and around of vacation or so on, then they would be able to use it for stuff that's already been scheduled. And quite frankly, I think if you ask the department heads, most of it will be expired relatively soon than later.
Okay.
And this policy as well addresses a couple things in the HR report from Dr. Grice. She didn't list recommendation numbers, but it's addressed on page 16 and page 17 and 18 of the HR consultant's report in regards to some discussion in there about how we're treating our salaried employees in regards to timekeeping.
So where you have purpose and it says, we will support flex time and telework arrangements, but you said you're dealing with flex time in the next policy, but it's addressed in this policy. And do we have I didn't know we had telework arrangements.
That would be in
Is
the next
that new?
policy. Yeah.
That's also in the next policy, so if you pass this without discussing the next policy, you're committing to policy you haven't talked about, I guess is my question.
Well, it just says, therefore, nothing in this policy guarantees employees the opportunity to work under a flex time or telework arrangement. So so there's nothing in this current policy that says, yes, there will be flex time or telework. It just says, therefore, nothing in this policy guarantees employees the opportunity to work under a flex time or telework arrangement.
So that's new, that's added new to this policy. What,
Then I have to ask the question, why wouldn't you end it at normal business hours, period? And then push.
Oh,
I'm just asking. I know what you're trying to accomplish,
Yeah.
but you've essentially,
Yeah, we can.
you address something you say can't be addressed
Right. I
in
mean,
this
It
policy.
hasn't been addressed yet.
it hasn't been addressed yet, but yeah, we can remove that and then just pass the next
And
policy.
then when the next policy
Yeah.
comes into play,
I guess the question that fiscal officer brought up is maybe we should discuss the flex time first. And if we choose to pass that, then we can go back to this one, and it's already been discussed and
then it
agreed to.
wouldn't, right, then it wouldn't matter.
or are they tied? I mean, should that, I don't know the answer, should the second policy be tied to this policy? Why, I kinda agree with Mr. Kretz, why wouldn't you just stop after normal business hours? And that's the policy, but then,
And then your next,
You go
Because
on
then
and
it
do
doesn't,
it the
then
next-
it doesn't allow the flex time, because I think normal business hours are then defined.
We can take
And
that
that
out.
keeps the constricted
Right, but
numbers in there rather than allowing for flex time if we choose to adopt that.
right, but as a policy, my suggestion was if you keep this clean, and then the next policy could be flex time or
Then-
not.
Then I wouldn't put it, normal business hours, I would, a normal, work week. 40-hour work week, if we wanna do that.
Well, we do currently identify normal business hours.
Right.
So, and those are what we call the core hours as discussed in the next.
The-
And
it's
well, I
always,
disagreed with those when we did them, so I
Right.
think that's why, you can't put in normal business hours unless you have defined them and we have somewhere. And then it doesn't allow for the flex time, because now you're talking about everything has to be in these normal business hours. So if you're talking about a work week, and we define that as a before and afterwards as a 40-hour work week, then the others seem to fall in place to me. But otherwise, if you just cut that here, I don't think it's a problem. But you're saying this first sentence allows for that flexibility because it affects the ability to work within those normal
It's
business
strictly
hours?
the purpose of the policy is what we're defining.
Right.
So the fact that the last sentence counteracts
Okay,
the sentence that starts, the township will support flex time, why have it in there if you're gonna say it doesn't
And then,
apply?
and then turn around and
okay.
say that
And
doesn't
that
really
sounds
affect
like-
anything in
yeah,
this
no, I
policy.
think
That's
he could be
the only
right,
point.
because this then allows you to
Right.
define the other.
And if you don't like the
Okay.
word normal, you could put the township's business hours,
Okay.
period, because then there's no subjective,
Which is different for a
determination
fire
of
than
normal.
it is for the regular.
Right, you're not trying, there is no definition of normal at that point, it's just the township's business hours.
Okay, I could agree to that modification. But,
To striking everything after business hours,
right, and
Yeah.
say within townships business hours.
and then removing the word normal.
Got it.
Does that make make sense?
Yes.
Ms. Aarons?
Yeah.
Okay.
The, are we still on the overtime policy? Is that what we're? keeping
We're
around?
still on the
That-
overtime comp
that
policy, yes, sir.
Purpose paragraph there.
Okay. Do you need a motion?
If you're gonna do it,
All right.
or if you're gonna wait, I don't know.
Make a move.
I don't know, I have a problem with this, with this is worded, I have a problem with telework. I have a problem with telework. And,
That's in the next policy.
We're removing that from this one.
Yeah,
Mr. Paxton.
we just removed that entire first section.
alright, so you talked about that, I was trying to
Yeah.
comprehend,
Yeah.
that's what you were talking about.
Right now, we've removed, if you go to the first sentence, we've removed the word normal, where it says the township's normal business hours.
Mhm.
So we've striking the word normal, it's gonna say the township business hours, period,
Yeah.
and then the rest of it's gone.
Right. Okay.
Because we'll address that in the next policy.
I'll make a motion to approve the policy for overtime compensatory time, section 1, number 1,
As
With-
amended,
as amended.
striking the word normal and ending at business hours, period.
And
Under
changing
purpose.
2.3 to 24 hours, not 40 hours.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that telework arrangements, worded, right?
That's gone.
Yes, as amended.
2.3 is modified to 24 hours, correct?
Okay. Ms. Graff,
Yes.
Mr. Paxton, did
Yeah.
you second? I'm sorry, I thought I heard Mr. Paxton second. Did you second? I
Yeah.
didn't mean to overstep.
Any further discussion?
Okay, Mr. Paxton.
Yeah.
Mr. Kretz.
Yes.
I'll make the modifications. Thank you. And the other, just to point out that in the policy, it would have today's date in regards to approved and the accumulation end as of today.
Okay.
Thank you, board. The next item is the last policy I have for you today is the work schedule policy. This is recommend some changes here, also incorporates some things that are currently in the handbook. It has been reviewed by HR as well as legal. All the changes have been made. In fact, I don't think there was any recommendation on changes in regards to this policy. It also meets the recommendations of Dr. Grice's report on page 16 of her report in regards to adding teleworking back into the policy.
So what's new?
Obviously, flex time, as Ms. Aarons, you and I have discussed over time, flex time is all new. It is not currently addressed in the handbook of what flex time is. We are also identify the standard work week. So under the policy number 1, it incorporates the 40 hours per week, Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30 as we discussed in the core hours, unless otherwise modified by the township administrator. It includes the current 30-minute lunch break and the two 10-minute breaks, but with, as the current policy states, you can include the two 10-minute breaks as a part of your lunch hour as long as your supervisor approves that. That's currently in there. 1.3 is currently in there, and 1.4 I think is just an addition clarifying that the road department as well as the maintenance personnel need to follow their departmental policy in regards to breaks. So just solidifying the first section, it says they have agreements up and beyond that. Obviously adding what flex time is as a definition, and as well as telework. As you recall, the township used to have what we called a home-based work schedule. This is the name has changed to telework. Telework is the industry standard both in the public and private sector. Flex time on section 2 is all new. It allows the township administrator to alter a employee's normal work schedule under flex time or telework arrangement. So any telework arrangements and flex time arrangements need to be approved by the township administrator. identifies fixed starting times and how a supervisor can adjust this. Now, what this would allow, for example, is alternate schedules for summer, much like we do with the used to do with the road department. They didn't do it last summer, but they did do it the summer before, taking advantage of the daylight hours and going to a 10-hour work week. This would also allow any other department to make such arrangements subject to township administrator approval. Also in this policy under section 2, it allows for individuals. So for example, when we were doing the creek project in Hunters Point, when we were renting a piece of equipment, there was some discussion to allow the employee to adjust their schedule so we could take advantage of the daylight hours and the use of the rental equipment, hopefully to shorten that time frame. Unfortunately, we have nothing in our current handbook that allows that. Any time over would be considered overtime. So this would, for example, in this case, allow the department head to customize the schedule based on projects, based on use of rental equipment that we may be using, or go to a different alternate schedule altogether. And then telework is also discussed there as well. Flex time and telework considerations. This is just explaining what a supervisor must go through before requesting that. Several questions the supervisor or the employee needs to ask themselves before going. This is an industry kind of standard policy, and this is kind of mirrors some of the other public jurisdictions or other jurisdictions I looked at in the public sector in regards to questions that need to be asked before a flex time schedule or telework. Guidelines is all new.
Before you go ahead, the original sentence is talking about the normal work week or whatever, we were back there.
Mm-hmm.
And this all refers to the 40-hour work week person, but it doesn't indicate that at the beginning. And I think that's because it doesn't refer to firefighters, which have a completely different schedule, only those who do have the 40-hour week. So maybe somewhere in there you have to.
Well, that goes back to page 1 of any of the policies on applications, that the employees need to go to their individual agreements that they may have that will supersede this policy. This policy will affect anyone that's not currently under a contract or agreement. But if it's not addressed in their agreement, then it refers to this policy.
So effectively, full-time firefighters would be excluded from this policy.
Yeah, because it is we
long as
specify their start times, I
That
believe,
are under the
in their
bargaining agreement.
contract.
Okay, as long as that's very obvious and
Doesn't sound,
it's understood.
that did not sound good, so.
That sounds like a contract. You heard something.
Yeah, I heard something here.
Okay, I'll throw out a couple things just as discussion points and stimulus for conversation. So, and I've been party to these in previous lives, so this will be reflective of some of that experience. On flex time, the issues were always consistency with how the employee is handled, how their schedule is set up. So that it's not 1 week it's this schedule, next week it's a different schedule, and the third week it's something in between the two. So reliability, so the peer workers and departments can rely on that person and when they're going to be there, which leads to availability, that we all do business within a certain framework of time on a daily, weekly basis, so we expect someone to be available during certain periods of time. And you open this up to, you have departments that it's necessary for them to communicate and work together on a regular basis, and you may have conflicting flex schedules when they need to be working together. So that's up to the administrator, obviously, to manage. When you get into compressing 40 hours into 4 days, one of the things I have here is compression limits, and we had to do that in a previous life because we had an individual that tried to put 40 hours in 3 days. And so then you get into quality of work, availability, but I don't see anything here preventing that or limiting that. So I'm just pointing it out. And then obviously the issues and concerns of coverage. So it becomes a balancing act for whoever is managing this to be able to have a master schedule and know who's interworking between each other, and who has to be available, and then making sure that the quality of work doesn't suffer because they're compressing too many hours of work into too few days. On the teleworking side, it's all of the same things I just covered as far as the concerns. But then, and I have employees that do this, and I know of other individuals that do this, and in every situation, they are monitored when they telework. So, which involves adaptation or buying technology to monitor that. So, for example, when my sister steps away from her computer, and she works in a hospital setting, but she's permitted a certain number of hours per pay period to be able to telework. It's not an everyday, and it's not whenever she feels like it. There's a limit there. But when she steps away from her computer, they have technology that knows that she's not at her computer. Her manager has the ability to look in via webcam and verify that she's working. So the policing of that are some of the things that you have to, and this is a big hospital network that she works for. So the step away monitoring, the manager look in, how many hours per pay period are we going to permit this, and then who provides the separate phone and the separate internet. How does that work if this person has to communicate with other departments? And then connectivity issues, if they lose internet, are they still paid or not?
Or does our IT run out to wherever, somebody.
These are just issues that you have to bring up, and there's a way to address each one to make it work. It's just how do you make sure you cover these bases so that so someone isn't penalized because they didn't know or we didn't think of it, and number two, to avoid as many pitfalls of abuse as possible.
Which positions do you visualize would be using the teller?
What I would suggest also is that we separate the two, and that flex time, maybe we talk about and we address flex time separate from telework, because I think flex time in itself is a good idea, and I can support that if it has the right parameters. But teleworking, I think, is another animal.
It is.
And I think we might be able to accomplish flex today, and maybe telework maybe get deferred. I'm just throwing that out there. I like everything you put together, but it just
I did a lot of research on this.
we're gonna tear it apart, rip the heart right out of it.
Yeah,
So,
no, that's fine. I've reviewed several policies, both in the public and private, and mostly public sector, to see how everybody else is handling these type of issues. To go back to, and I have no problem with going back and separating the two policies into two
even just
separate
discussion
documents.
wise, maybe we can leave it as one policy, but from a discussion, if we can reach a consensus on flex and then move to telework rather than try to
The
reach
idea
a consensus on
for
both.
flex time, and the policy does allow for flex time for both salaried and hourly employees, but only, and I know that's been a discussion over the years, is if an employee, for example, an hourly employee, is willing to flex their time, why can't we allow it? Well, we can't allow it because we don't have a policy that allows it. So it has to be, and I know we had this discussion with nighttime meetings, and we had a previous understanding with an hourly employee that they had to flex their time. And that correction was made because that violates the FLSA and also violates our current policy. So now we have a policy that says, well, this will open up for not only hourly but salaried employees. But to go back to who's really going to use this, it's right now the department heads. I envision, there may be an entire department that comes in and adjusts their hours based on summer hours. And that approval process follows the policy here that allows it. But then again, we may have an individual who's working on a project, an hourly employee, who is willing to flex their time as opposed to accumulating an overtime cost for us. And as long as the supervisor and the employee agree to that, then that can be accomplished.
I think you could do that with the union. I wouldn't even try that with union.
Well, this
This
doesn't,
doesn't
disregard,
apply.
when we say this, addresses anything that's not currently in an agreement. Overtime is a contractual issue with our union. So
Right,
this
well-
policy will not affect that. We have a line in the contract that says, this is how we're gonna pay you overtime. And overtime hours, you have the option to take comp time. And we even specified that amount.
Okay.
This is, and that's why in the references and the application, this is really addressing anyone who's covered under the labor agreement or covered under another agreement. If, for example, it's not addressed anywhere in an agreement or contract, then yes, this policy could be used, but it's supervisor based. It is approval through that. So right now, for example, IT cannot, by our current policy, get credit from logging in the middle of the night to address an issue. So that goes kind of to the teleworking side. Cannot log in from home. Now we can track that. We can track in the login time. We can track the work that's being done to the system and correcting any errors. But if the system goes down, and I will tell, and IT will probably agree with me on this, is that since we don't have a policy in regards to it, we are requiring them to come in and fix the issue.
Let me ask you this. When you applied for the job, what was your interpretation of the work that needed to be done? May inquire some off-duty time to fix things or not?
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
they're 24/7 operations, so yeah, you're gonna have to be there to support it, but you also get compensated for it by comp time, or, you know, and are several times when I come in on the weekend or log in from home to fix an issue.
But we've been required to track our time minute by minute, and I think that's what Alex is trying to.
Well, what I'm getting at is when you hire somebody's salary, it's understood. I mean, it's understood you gotta get the job done. That's what it is.
That's what this policy is saying.
It's understood.
Right.
And some weeks you might work a 60-hour week, and the next week, and that's my interpretation of flex time.
That's
It's not
exactly what this policy is
Well,
addressing.
we tried to talk about that. You're just
Yeah.
taking comp time and flex time and exchanging the words of what you're saying. It's a time for time. You're not comp time because you're not getting rewarded. You're just moving time. You
Right.
take an 8-hour day and you're taking off the first 3 hours of the day because you're going to be 3 hours into the evening at a meeting. Is that you're talking about flex time?
That's exactly
Yeah.
what I'm saying.
All right.
Yeah. Or if you can't have that ability, you're to flex that time later on. So
In the week, in the pay period. or
in the pay
whatever.
period essentially, but because it makes it a little difficult when our pay period ends Wednesday, essentially at midnight. So, so for example, if Mr. Amrine has a Wednesday meeting at the end of a pay period, which he normally does with whoever zoning BZA, he can't flex it within that pay period. So now, to go back to what you said, absolutely, a salaried employee would just say, okay, either tomorrow, being Thursday of the new pay period, I'm gonna come in either 2 or 3 hours late based on my meeting last night, or if I can't because I have pre-scheduled meetings, I'll make that adjustment Friday or whatever, Monday of next week. So,
But you
for
still-
example, we had an employee here yesterday doing work. Okay, so part of a salaried employee coming in, you know, Mr. Terry's here, I'm here, sometimes on the weekends. You would be able to flex those times within the necessary time frame. Now, if we say pay periods, we are definitely limiting ourselves to, you know, I could say to Mr. Amrine, yes, you have a meeting tonight at the end of the pay period, but let's say that, as we know, some of our zoning meetings could go till midnight. So how do you flex that time? So I agree with you. That's what I'm trying to establish here, is that our salaried employees, some weeks may work 100 hours in 1 week, Monday through Friday, depending on hours, calls at night, et cetera, whatever it takes to get the job done. But what we're currently doing under the current policy of the township is we are requiring them to track all their time as an hourly employee, and then we're compensating them comp time on top of that. So if you look at my timesheet or one of the other department timesheets, you will see that there are times where we try to flex the time, at least because I have a separate agreement, but there's times we can't because of meetings. It doesn't matter. If it takes me 100 hours to get the work done in that week, okay, then this allows for that adjustment to be made. But right now, the current policy is treating our salaried employees more like hourly employees.
Just because you're giving comp time for the time.
Not only that, we're tracking their
asking them
time.
to track their time
We're
because-
asking them to track every minute of their time.
They're effectively hourly.
Well,
Yeah,
which is-
and I tell you, we have a liability here. There's a liability that someone at that table over there could say, I'm no longer a salaried employee, and here's the reasons why. I'm filling out a timesheet, I'm tracking my time down to the minutes, I am required to work over and track those overages, and they're compensating me for that as well, that overage. So a true salary position is what the intent of part of this, and I agree with Mr. Kratz, maybe we need to separate the flex time discussion and telework arrangement separately. But the intent here, much like you saw in the previous, is to say, no, we're gonna treat our salaried employees as salaried employees.
And I think there still needs to be some common sense and understanding of boundaries to that.
Absolutely.
And, for instance, you know, if I'm on the department head, I come in and I say, okay, I'm gonna come in 3 hours late today because I know that Friday I'm gonna work 3 hours over.
Mhm.
So that, in essence, that's, upfront time off, you know.
Well,
It's upfront time. Then if something happens that person got sick and couldn't work that 3 hours after on Friday, now there's a 3 hour, you know what I'm saying? There's a room of abuse. So, you know, I don't like to say that word when we trust our department heads, but I'm just saying, it's gotta be within a common, boundary. And the 8-hour day, you know, is a typical work hour day for this township.
And we
So-
we do establish that as the standard work week
Yeah, so-
in section 1.
right.
Because that's when everybody's.
That's exactly, and it's quite frankly times that I will need to rely on a department head. It's the same time.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Consistency, availability,
Exactly.
everything else.
And we've had this discussion. In fact, we had this discussion at the staff meeting this last week. Is how do they, if this policy would pass, how do the department heads let me know? And I still ask the department heads now to let me know. So I know if a phone call is made and someone says, hey, this department head's not in the office today, why not? I can answer that question. Much like I can do right now.
Right, but each department head serves either the public or internal customers on a daily basis. So whether it's your own staff or each other, so.
But they can't do it willy-nilly, they have to get the permission of his/her supervisor, in this case it'd be township administrator, if it's a
Well,
department head.
yeah, and even on a salary, there needs to be some kind of accountability mechanism in there.
Wait,
You know, I'm not saying a time clock, you know, I'm saying, but there needs to be some kind of accountability.
and accountability is the supervisors knowing where their employees are.
So when you say
Yeah.
supervisor, so, in my mind, there's only one supervisor,
For that
that
group.
has subordinate supervisors, is Tim. So his supervisor is
And
under
Dave.
him, and Dave, I'm sorry.
I have quite a few.
Well, you got contract, it's contractual. This is not contractual.
Well, no. They're,
I have five.
Okay,
Yeah.
I was just talking
supervisors
Tim,
that
all
are
right, so
supervisors.
Tim,
I can tell you where every one of my employees is every day of the week.
I know that, I'm just saying so what you're saying is Tim's supervisor, his subordinate supervisor, because you're saying supervisor here,
that's exactly what.
can make a determination on somebody's flex time without Tim's approval, because he's a supervisor underneath Tim. That's how I'm reading this, supervisor. You got Tim as the department head, he has paid supervisors underneath of him who can alter somebody's work schedule. Is that what this is saying? That's how I'm reading this. Tell me I'm wrong.
Well, no, because when we talk about
That was one of the questions I had, that's why I'm
So
asking.
just, let's take the,
just wanna
telework
clarify.
arrangement. All changes made to a department or employee's normal schedule under flex time, forget the rest of the sentence, must be approved by the township administrator.
Oh, okay.
So
So any supervisor makes a change, gotta come to you to.
they have to make the request to that supervisor, absolutely. And then the supervisor has to say, yeah, I think that's a good idea, or no, I don't think it's a good idea, before it even comes up to my level.
Okay, so 2.1 essentially is your catch-all,
Yeah.
is what you're saying.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I
then
just
when
don't
we're,
want there to be a problem where I'm a supervisor and I made this.
so on section 3, so take out the telework discussion at this point. Supervisors must consider the following questions to determine if flex time schedules are viable work option, are a viable work option, sorry. So, and then those questions, and of course, we can drop out those as well. At the telework part.
Yeah, I'm for the flex stuff, I just
Yeah,
want to.
no, and I agree with you. Quite frankly, I saw some policies that were much more liberal than these, okay? For example, FLSA is pretty clear about salaried employees, and there are some provisions in regards to hours. 4 hours is considered a day for salaried employees, which I disagree with. But there
Where
are
do you get
policies
that?
out there that say that.
Where do you get that at? 4 hours is considered a day, where do you get that at?
Well, it's not in our current policy because I disagree with
That
it.
is somebody's policy, or is that?
Yeah, Washington Township and City of Xenia currently has that in their policies.
Okay, where do they get that at?
It's a
It's in the DOL.
DOL. Mhm.
DOL
But
says
that
for-
doesn't,
for-
that
For
doesn't include the
salaried
fact.
employees.
But DOL for salary employees, is that exempt or non-exempt or?
That's salaried exempt employees.
There's still an expectation that the job will get done, and
That's
you're
what this
getting
policy
somewhere around
says.
40 hours,
Yeah.
ish, give or take a little bit each week.
Alex, when you and I talk about flex time, and I'm just so I'm understanding you're coming to this, you know, with it, like you said, a salaried individual working, you know, you had a meeting at night. Like when I look at the compressed work week and things like that, it's not to establish a consistent work week that varies from the normal business hours. It's just on an as needed project based type of, is that your intent, I guess?
Or seasonal. So for example.
Or seasonal, like a road when.
You're
right.
addressing the exception, not the rule.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
That's my intent of this policy is, so for example, when we have, and this will help with our seasonal employees as well that are in the road department, is we're gonna, if, for example, Tim says, I think it's a good idea, he works it out with his staff says, yeah, we're gonna do a 10-hour work week, I can make that adjustment for that summer. And then, now, one of the things that when we used to do seasonal work in that department is that, yeah, there are some issues that, for example, they're 1 day a week. We don't have a very large road department where other jurisdiction can say half the employees are gonna have Mondays off, the other half employees will have Fridays off. We don't have that. We have a limited group who tend to work on projects together based on skill set and everything else. There will be a day a week that the office for the road department will be closed, like we've had in the past. So now, are they still available? The department head is still available to make some things, and I will tell you, when I first got here and we were allowing for the summer schedule, there were times that our salaried employee would come in and address issues on that day off with the road department. It was not scheduled because of a compressed, let's say, 10-hour day work week. So yes, that's the intent. So, and if the board would like, because I think a lot of these sentences are intertwined between flex time and telework. So, if the board would like to separate the two documents, but when it comes to our salaried employees, I think the last policy when it says, excuse me, you know, FLSA exempt employees are accountable for their performance outcomes rather than for time worked. I mean, that states what we expect out of our salaried employees. For example, if it takes Mr. Terry to come in on the weekends to do an update, because that is our downtime in a 24/7 operation, then that's what it requires. But then again, how do we, currently, there is no policies to allow Mr. Terry to say if he does work 8 hours on a Saturday, how does he flex that time? How does he make that adjustment for that time?
Okay, and for the teller one, which employees, or which positions do you envision that being applicable?
The only employees under the old system when I was here under telework, which was called the home-based work policy, the only employees that ever got my approval were the department heads. And mostly those were just, really, I think, of any times I approved it, it was IT.
Okay, so essentially it's IT because they can get into the network, do it at home rather than having to come here, which makes much more sense. It's faster. It gets done more quickly. Are there any other things that perhaps might take place, or would it be extremely unusual and a unique situation where any other employee would do the telework other than maybe you?
Well, there are times, for example, if we have someone on vacation, okay, on scheduled vacation leave, where if an incident would occur that would require an advice from the department head, whether they're in the state or outside the state, that phone call that is made, there is currently no provision to allow to change that time. So, for example,
Don't we tell our people, other than our IT person, to turn off their cell phones on vacation?
no.
So,
I mean,
because that leads to a whole nother problem.
I agree.
I've lived that battle and lost.
Yeah. What we got to be cautious of is there a way to allow somebody who may do something, do some research on a discipline issue or something like that, or immediate issue, to adjust that time? Do we take that as regular pay and adjust that hour, or let's say, for example, 8 hours vacation? Do we say, okay, they worked a half an hour, took phone calls, blah, blah, blah? We don't have that provision. There's no
And
way
I
that
think that's
allows that.
foolish, particularly
But-
when we don't have a lot of backfill.
That's right.
You
We
know,
are very lean and we don't have backfill that you can say we have an assistant township administrator who can do all those things. Or we have an assistant person who's gonna do.
But we do
whatever.
actually have, if the township administrator is unavailable, we do have a provision for that.
We do have a provision for that, yep.
yeah,
But there are times, I
There
will
are
tell you,
times when
that
he
even the
still
acting administrator will shoot me a text or something saying,
Yeah.
how do you want me to proceed with that? Now, I've never adjusted my time for that. I've documented that time,
Yeah.
but I've not
But
adjusted.
didn't you just take care of that when essentially what you're talking about are your department heads who you've now just set are salaried and no longer gaining comp time or anything, so if
Right.
they have a phone call in the middle of the night and IT does, that's part of
Then
their
that could
job
be-
and their
that could be
salary and
flexed. That's fine.
that's
That
flex,
could be
then why would you need the other, that's my,
No, when he's on vacation.
that's part of the performance, what you're
And
talking
is
about.
it all vacation, which is then they have the 2 week or whatever, 4 week vacation, however many. But then a call comes in, and it could be, and I never know, it could be catastrophic, something's happening, what do I do? Is it then all again, it's still your vacation, so whatever, or should it count as work time is what you're saying? And I don't think anyone has ever abused any of this kind of stuff, at least that I've seen over the years.
Well, since the adding of the position of township administrator, any of the policies all go up to that, has to be approved by the township administrator. And that was the same as the original work-based policy that was in the handbook. It was all
which was
approved,
eliminated.
which was
Why
eliminated.
was it eliminated?
And one minute you're talking about.
Only going back to what,
Because there's some people who believe you're not working if you're not at your desk 8 to 4.
but it's also
Yeah, 8
identified
to 4,
to bring it back
and that's not true.
as part of a industry standard in the HR report. So I'm only doing what, as a part of the performance audits to bring him back what was
I'd like to
identified.
see
in the
who
books.
does it. I mean, I would like to see who does it. I mean, and the flex time, I know it goes on, I know. It's an understanding. it's an understanding, and if you get that phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning, if your job requires that, you know that, I'm getting that phone call at 3 o'clock, I'm gonna answer that call, I'm gonna do what I need to do to get the problem solved. Alright? Then I'm gonna go, if I'm on vacation, I'm gonna go and do it. In one essence, you're talking about not treating a department head as an hourly employee, but now you're talking about compensating for their time when they're on the phone.
No, I'm saying them exactly what you just said, Mr. Paxton, was to treat them to get the job done.
Well, it's part
And
of
to
the,
adjust-
part of the flex time, it's part of
To
their
make that
job.
adjustment, but right now in our current policy, our department heads and salaried employees are to create some other document that does not exist and track every minute of their day. That's in the current policy. And I
I
would,
didn't review the policy before.
this was added in the last revision, so
No,
you,
I don't recall them, I don't recall, I may be wrong, I don't recall, because that's part of that, was part of that revision.
yes.
All right, and so was Mr. Glazer, and so was Ms. Scrag.
Yeah, I voted no on that one.
I know you
I
did.
remember
But
very
as you
specifically.
pointed out to me, it's a voting process, and there was two or
Right,
three.
so the current policy in place is requiring our salaried employees.
No,
Yes.
I would like to see that. I may be wrong,
We'll
could
get
be
it,
wrong.
we'll get it.
The 40-hour week, you know, is based on a 40-hour week, being in here in office hours of 8 to 4:30. That, to me, that was, the core of really the argument behind that. It wasn't hour for hour kind of thing. It was to be in here when our business hours are 8 to 4. So,
We're gonna take a 5-minute recess? Okay.
but anyway, I'm with you on the flex time, but if somebody takes a call, you know, I'm thinking flex time, okay, I'm thinking flex time, maybe 3 hours a week might be a busy week, or, you know, if you do a couple meetings a week, 3 hours might be a busy week. So, or even maybe a half a day on occasion, you know, 6 hours. If Dave's on a working fire, he's out there
I
for
agree
3 or 4
with you.
hours,
I
you know,
agree.
there you go, and, you know, sleeping in the morning, I'll see you at noon or something like that. I think that's perfectly understandable. Now, if he takes a call at 3 o'clock in the morning and he's got an accident, somebody had an accident, piece of apparatus, I'm sure he's gonna take care of what he needs to take care of.
It sounds like correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, but it sounds like the exceptions to the rule can be handled through flex.
That's
Authorizing someone to work from home
Is a different-
is a totally
Yeah,
different
right,
situation.
right.
And so the exception of whether you're on vacation or it's a typical Saturday night for Mr. Terry and he gets a phone call that the server went down. So those will be handled through flex, but authorizing an employee to work from home and telecommute or telework, carve that out separately. No, because we all know a 2-minute phone call really ends up being a 30-minute phone call. So, okay.
So if the board would like, we can separate the two, and it sounds like there's not much changes or disagreement in regards to flex time and identifying that, and then
I just went through and I was looking at everywhere you have the instance of the word telework.
it's
and I'm
in
trying to
every
think-
policy, it's
Yeah,
every one.
right, if that can be removed, but I don't see where the rest of it would need to be modified, if you know what I'm saying.
I agree with you.
So if you just struck the word telework from the entire policy, including the definition, it appears that you would still have a clean flex time
Yeah,
policy.
and the only other thing that would have to be pulled would be under 2.1.4.
Right, I'm looking at
Telework
it.
schedule.
There's just so many other factors that can come into telework. Is it light duty? Is it, I mean, there's all kinds of things that can come
But
into.
you're saying that
creep into that.
if there's some work from home, Alice could consider that as flex time.
On the exception to the standard work week, is what
Okay.
we're saying.
All right.
Which you've defined the standard work week, and you've defined flex time. do you wanna redraft and represent, or do you wanna modify and approve?
That's up to the board. If you're okay with removing anything that says telework from the flex time, then I can resubmit. If the board's interested in telework, if not, please let me know, because then I don't have to
Right.
recreate a document that is.
I could go along with eliminating the telework and ask you to not put a new document together, but maybe give us a short summary next time of what telework might include, if we were gonna have a policy.
I think if you're talking working from home, Alex, if you're talking working from home, telework, it's a whole nother different thing here.
Right.
And what you're trying to portray here is taking a phone call at home. And I read this telework as working from home. What you're talking about, taking a phone call from home is in line with the flex time
Right.
and part of doing that. Taking work home and is a whole other different animal of work, and you try to address it under the considerations, as section 3, you know, when confidential information, all that kind of stuff. I think you're trying to address taking work home, doing work from home, from the server, shooting back confidential through the internet system or whatever. You're talking a whole other animal there with telework at home.
And we can separate it. Most of the policies that
It happens every day, but it's a very controlled setting.
It is right, and most of the policies that I've looked at have combined.
Okay.
There's one instance that I know that it has not been covered here that telework might. There was an instance a number of years ago, one of our employees was off on leave, In Touch was due, the person was in charge of the In Touch submission, worked on it from home because could get into the computer to get it all ready and got set in, and applied for having worked 2 hours during the time that was on leave. It was actual work, it was work that no one else could do, and it was done from home. It was not done every single day, but it was a one time. Is that considered flex time? Is that considered telework? How would one consider it, or do you not want the person to do the work at all and just let it go because it can't be done because the individual isn't available?
I recall our labor attorney directing us to be careful with assigning light duty work to an injury or something like that hasn't, an off-duty injury, assigning light duty work, we might be setting ourselves up for a precedent. If it's somebody who's injured on the job, then that's a different management animal. So
We don't. What's the board's wishes here? I'll separate the two.
Okay.
I can.
Given that we eliminated comp time, I guess I would be in support of I just went through this page by page. It's not that complicated to strike the word or telework. And then on page 205 of the policy, which is page 16 of the packet, eliminate the telework definition, but otherwise just strike the words or telework throughout the document, and it appears to suffice.
Yeah, one thing that doing my research, 4.16, I do want to point this out to the board. Staff is aware of it. If there is flex time or compressed work week schedules, in other words, if, for example, the road department is on a 40-hour work week for the summer,
July 4th ago.
And there's potentially 1 or 2 holidays depending on when we start it and when we cut it off. There has to be an adjustment made to the holiday. Okay, so 4.16 addresses that issue. So, for example, holiday pay for an employee with a compressed work week schedule will be recognized as an 8-hour day. If a recognized holiday falls on a regular scheduled workday, the employee must either work the additional hours during the holiday week or use other paid leave, vacation, personal time. Well, that would not, obviously our salaried employees would not be able to use the comp time except for the 3 battalion chiefs. However, the other salaried employees would have to consider using vacation or personal leave to make up that 2-hour adjustment. So if they're on a 10-hour day for that holiday. So I just want to point that out.
So we can modify and approve, we can redraft and put it to a vote at the next meeting. We have a gap essentially, which then we can address the gap as well.
I would go for modify and approve. So I move to approve. Let me get back to the beginning here. The work schedule policy, eliminating all references to telework and the definition of telework from the policy.
I'll second. There is in the handbook right now, a policy, if I recall, that department head can come and modify. Tim comes before the board to modify his summer schedule. It's already in the policy, he can modify the schedule.
That's true.
Tim modifies the schedule.
Yeah. Now this allows for
This
the,
guy's coming from the board.
no, this policy allows for the administrator to make that decision. Because it goes back to the one example, if we have a project in immediate need where we can make an adjustment to someone's schedule that will not occur an overtime cost to us, this policy will kick in and allow me to make that adjustment. As long as the employee and the supervisor agree to it and they present it to me in that manner.
Okay. I just wanna make sure that I look at this customized schedule. 2.1.3, all right. Flex schedule. When you're talking a flex schedule, customized schedule, you're talking.
This is not flex time, this is customized schedule, yes.
What are you talking about there with customized schedule?
Well,
Customized schedule, like Tim's working 4 days, 4
That-
10-hour days?
that could be,
every time
well,
like
that's
schedule?
addressed in the policy before. In the compressed, 2.1.2 is the compressed work week. Okay, so that would allow for the 40 hours or 9s or whatever. The customized schedule will allow for adjustment different from what is
Coming
identified.
in 2 hours, leaving 2 hours, coming in.
That's flex time.
Instead of a 9 to 5, or instead of 8 to 4:30, might be a 9 to 5:30. Is that a customized schedule?
Pretty much, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But not forever, only for certain circumstances.
It doesn't void the standard work week.
It doesn't, yeah, the
It's
core
still-
office hours
Specific
are
period.
to,
Right.
to remain open, yeah.
Right. The experiences I've had in the past is that employee morale, or at least the people that are affected by this, typically their morale goes up. And their productivity has not, there are flyers where there's gonna be, the only word that concerns me in 2.13 is where it says or personal situations. I mean, it's operational is 100% agreement, but or personal just leaves you open to, and I understand that, but then you get into, is it light duty? Is it, is it to take care of a family member who's at hospice? I don't know. I'm just throwing out, it can create,
That's right.
animosity between employees or department heads. You just have to manage that.
And you've seen morale go up, and I've seen morale go down because of the same situation. All eyes are on those of us above. So I've seen morale go down. I too don't. I mean, that was a question I had in here because we have leave already on the books, as you, what you're talking about, personal situation. We have FMLA already in place. We have tools already in place. And right now, special situations come before the board to approve extended leave or, you know, things like that.
We'll be taking that out.
And,
Not 2.13, we're taking out 2.14.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
2.14.
But on 2.13, my only suggestion would be to leave it at operational situations.
yeah,
If that's what I would recommend that, just to avoid, because you have other tools in the toolbox to address
The personal.
that's
the personal situations. So now that we have carved this up like a fine steak,
I'm willing to accept that amendment to my motion and take out the word or personal in
Yeah, and-
2.1.3.
honestly, I don't know, there's a lot of change in there. I'd like to see a clean copy before I approve it. That's where I'm at with it.
You can move to table.
if we table this, then we have a gap essentially to address, and what would be the reasonable expectation to cover that gap
The gap you're talking about.
between now and our next meeting of when someone might accrue flex time.
Oh,
No, crew comp time.
We've eliminated comp
Well,
time.
that's my point. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you couldn't fill in the date on the comp time, you could change that date. I mean, it's still
At the next
open,
meeting?
even though you guys approved it, you could put the date on the comp time, not as today, but rather,
2 weeks
Next
from today.
meeting, June.
That would accomplish the same thing. That would cover the gap and allow you to split the document into a document for flex schedules and revisit telework. Do we need to modify that?
I don't know if we get,
that
do
motion?
we have someone who could just go through and eliminate what we asked and bring back
That
the clean
sample
copy,
about the hour.
you know?
Yeah, while we're here. Alex, Ms. Graff brought up a good question. Can we modify this and go on to other items on the agenda and come back to it at the end?
Someone modify if we go in and take out the words that we want and bring us the,
No, that's
can
under-
we,
it's you.
It's under mine, I'd have to go back there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, I-
approve the draft and not make this the final, like approve the draft?
do it for 10
Operate
minutes.
off the draft until we get the final? Can you do that?
I would not do that.
How much time do you need to make this change? 10 minutes?
Sure, I mean, I could forward to somebody else.
Let's take a 15-minute recess if we can, if everyone
Okay.
would agree to that.
I agree to that. Just a-
So it's 3:34 and we will resume.
And we're on the work schedule policy here.
Yeah,
you have-
and we've
and
got.
you have the
we're-
modified policy.
Yeah, we're circulating a modified version so everybody can take a glance at it, and then we can resume our intent to approve the modified.
We had the motion with the modification, we're just seeing that the modification has been accomplished.
Yeah, Alex, I just had one thought here, I'm reading this, and maybe this would be an interpretation for Dawn, and you were talking about hours worked. And the flex time, you got hours worked. I mean, I know we're looking at hours, but am I getting too picky here? On the flex time, it's scheduling arrangement that permits variations in the departments or employees starting and departure times, but does not change the total number of hours worked in a week. So, are we looking at hours worked, I mean, you're talking hours worked, we're not holding our department heads to specific hours worked.
It's a paid period.
I mean, I understand it's based off of a 40-hour work week, but we're not clocking it, we're not clocking in. That's just, it just flagged, just as I was reading it, I thought, maybe I'll just ask about that. Are we holding somebody to hours worked?
well, I mean, isn't it still your expectation that
It
your
is.
department heads are generally going to be working 40 hours per week or?
It's kind of a given, that's the kind of the typical work week is a 40-hour week.
And we define that under 1.1.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's just clearly the definition of flex time, I think you're looking at.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's a definition, but then you have the standard.
So-
I understand what you're saying,
so by saying that,
but
we're
I
not-
think you're okay with that.
Yeah, because in the handbook, that's what we were trying to achieve is a 40-hour, you know,
Right.
the Monday through Friday, 8-hour a day kind of gig, you know, that's, just-
Yeah.
okay, all right. That's,
But I had the trouble with the 1.1, although I won't ask it modified, because it's suggesting that if the standard work week is the 40 hours, and here are your office hours, that those two are connected. And I don't see them as necessarily being connected. That,
Well, flex
That-
time
that-
would modify that.
right,
That's kind of
I'm
business
just
hours
saying
of the
that, but it
township.
looks like it, the connection's there, and it's not in my mind. The office is open 8 to 4:30, that's when we have normal business hours, someone can come in if they need to. But individual workers might be working slightly different as long as the work is covered, and someone's here to take the issues necessary.
Yes, we'll look through the red lines there and make sure you're satisfied with that. And then we have a motion already.
Yes.
For the modified, which is red line.
But then I think what you just said is different from what I heard Alex say.
Okay.
So now I'm confused.
I'm looking at
For what you
that
said.
section 1.1, I'm not sure what he said.
Okay.
It says the standard work week shall be 40 hours a week. We understand that, that's
Right.
general. However you get those 40 hours in, give or take,
Right.
particularly if they're salary. Then it says office hours are Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30. What that describes to me is when our facilities are open for individuals to come in and get somebody who might be able to assist them on a particular kind of thing that they need. But they're tying those it could be,
We have some employees that don't work in the office.
right, and they don't work the 8 to 4:30, and they may not be there, they may be working 9 to 5:30. They may come in at 6 o'clock and leave at 3 o'clock because of what they're doing.
For always, see, that was my question to you, Alex, is flex time for flex when tied to, there's a project going on, there's something going on, or are you using it to change schedules? For a position to change their schedule forever and ever, they're on a different schedule than everybody else. And you said that it was tied to, yes, we want to be able to flex their salary, they move with the demands of the job. So that's where I was confused.
Yeah, the 8 to 4:30 what's identified in that is to go back to what the board previously set as office hours, that the offices will remain open between 8 and 4:30 for general public to do business with the township. There are times when, for example, if we did modify a department's work schedule, i.e. like, for example, the road department in the past for summer hours, that their building will not be open.
Right.
Okay, but the core hours of the office for the township is 8 to 4:30.
Okay.
Okay.
But the policy, as redlined in front of you, taking all the telework out, allows for modifications to that schedule. But the core hours, there will never be a time where I say the offices are closed, other than the other policy that says inclement weather.
They are separate.
They are separate,
The
yes.
office hours is a separate concept from the,
Yes.
somewhat related to, but
But he's not
separate
gonna come
from.
back to you and say the road department now and forever is gonna be only open from 12 to 4 o'clock every day.
Right. Because that's.
Right, that's
not-
because that's not what he wants. He's just saying
Right,
if
and it wouldn't
for
be
the
the 40
summer,
hours,
it's
right,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
That's not the intent, right?
Right,
Seasonal,
when the,
seasonal changes.
The flex
Right.
time is within the normal.
I was making sure you and I were on the same.
Yeah, I-
'cause
Operation
maybe
within
I
that
was
normal-
misunderstanding.
8-hour day.
Yeah, there will never be a time that someone's not in an office to answer somebody's question from the general public. Now,
During 8 and
other
4:30.
than, for example, right now, if I went to the road department during the day, there may not be anybody in that building. right now between 8 and 4:30 because they're all out doing
On the
jobs.
road.
But you haven't identified that as where to go for administrative
True.
inquiries. So,
Yeah. I
okay.
mean, they know,
You have operational and you have administrative. Okay. So we have a motion.
I think we understand.
We have a motion to approve the modified as presented. Is that how the motion?
Yeah,
Well,
I'm
we
gonna leave
presented
it the
with
way it
these
is,
changes.
Okay.
and then it'll have the changes, so that
Okay.
you've approved.
All right.
So, Ms. Graff,
Yes.
Mr. Paxton,
Yes.
Mr. Kratz.
Yes.
thank you, board. Next item on the agenda is on page 20. It's the sheriff's
You need
office
this?
bi-weekly report. Any questions on the bi-weekly report?
Yeah, here.
No, he reported and they're busy. We don't know where, but they did a lot of stuff.
Burglary in business, or is that in a residential? The burglaries? You know?
I have no idea.
Okay.
That's probably a business. I can double check though.
All right.
Thank you. Last item under the administrator is the joint meeting between the city and the township. We tentatively scheduled the last meeting for June 29th at our facility location. That has changed due to the council members' schedules. All council members can attend a joint meeting on June 30th, the next day. Same location, same time. And Mr. Cornell and I have had discussion. We have a meeting scheduled for the 11th to finalize a agenda. And of course, I'll say this again, I did have some notes, suggestions on agenda items. If you have any additional to those that were just, in addition to what we discussed at the last meeting, please let me know.
This would be an evening, afternoon, or morning?
This will be an evening, council meets at 6 p.m. in the evening.
But we're meeting here, correct?
Yes, we are meeting in
61.
hopefully in the basement of Station 61. Yeah, I just want to
How do
check
we
to make
change
sure
it?
that all of you are available.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. So, but I don't know how to change it on here. I just want to push it.
6 p.m.
6 p.m. Yes, and I will finalize everything.
Tuesday, June 30th.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm sorry, Tuesday.
Okay.
If everyone's available, I'll let the city manager know, and we'll finalize everything on the 11th at our meeting. Thank you, board. Next item is not in your packet, but in your spot is the finance department's bi-weekly report.
Any awareness
Pass it with
items? Any awareness items we need to?
Nothing, no awareness items. Staff is working on the tax budget, which will be presented to you at your July 6th meeting.
Okay, and this will incorporate the new,
That's correct. It'll take the 3-year average plus the CPI.
yeah. I had no other questions on that. That's great. Okay.
Thank you, board. Next item in your packet is HR's report on page 26. Any questions?
Where are we at on health insurance?
This past week, the HR manager and myself met with Mr. Polis, and we talked about several options. Our next step is to schedule a meeting with the committee, insurance committee, and then at your next meeting, Mr. Polis will be here as a pre-scheduled speaker to go over the options for the township.
Okay.
I think there's several options in there. They included the HSA options as in the past. We've already had those discussions based on the labor agreement, so those will be removed from the document once it's presented to the board and after the committee meets.
Okay, and how many part-time firefighters remain?
3, I think.
3 left. Okay. Okay. Any questions, HR? Nope. Ms. Graff?
Nope.
All right. Zoning?
Thank you, Board. In your packet, starting on page 28, is the zoning department's biweekly report. The department, as you can see, tends to continue to be very active. And then, of course, some of the other major projects that the department is also working on, as well as the US 35, the Highway Overlay District, as well as keeping up with the growth in the township.
Anything else, anything for zoning? Anyone? Mr. Baxter?
I think he's gonna be by his lonesome for a while, so he's gonna be very busy, extra busy.
IT?
Thank you, Board. The first item on IT's agenda is a purchase request. Our two Barracuda networks. This is our messenger archiver. This backs up, as you recall, with the retention policy for emails. Our current server that stores our archiver is at the end of life and is no longer receiving or subject to receive firmware upgrades for the device. We do have a purchase request. Mr. Terry will answer any question in regards to the product itself.
I'm familiar with the Barracuda, but at the end of the day, the one we have is end of life. You can't get any new firmware.
It was 2009, and they recommend 4 years actually, so we got a
Yeah.
couple extra years out of it.
Yeah.
And just as Eric said, we're no longer receiving firmware updates for it. So, the new one will increase the storage capabilities, and they'll come with all the updates. Current energizer updates will forward to the new device.
And we'll get it in if we purchase it prior to the other one collapsing. So we wouldn't have a
Yeah, it's
hiatus.
functioning fine, it's just, no longer gets the firmware updates. So if you wanna get that changed out as soon as you can.
And move to approve the purchase request 07496 to Barracuda Networks Incorporated for the hardware refresh of the Barracuda Message Archiver 350 in the amount of $3,749, and to authorize the township administrator to sign for the board.
Second,
Ms. Graff,
Yes?
Mr. Paxton,
yes.
Mr. Kratz.
Yes.
Thank you, Board. Next item under the IT is the biweekly report. Do you have any questions in regards to the report?
I just have one. I tried to access the ethics training, actually on the iPad, and it wouldn't let me do that. It didn't show me how to do it, so is it only, and I didn't see it on our YouTube section in the,
Yes, the link, did you receive the link with?
I received the link and I clicked on the link and it didn't get me where I was supposed to go.
It should have taken you directly to YouTube. Did it never still open on a YouTube page, or?
It took me to YouTube, but then I couldn't find the ethics training. So maybe you could show me afterward, okay.
Yeah, the training that was sent out is not under the public section of YouTube. It's not public, so
Okay.
it's used for more internal use, so it should take you straight to that link or to that video.
Right.
So
Put it so it didn't.
yeah, so we'll take a look at that. Any other questions for IT? Thank you, Board. Next item on the agenda starts on page 32 is the Road Department's biweekly report. I will point out one project that's been on hold waiting for vendors or contractors to get back to us is the move and the remodeling of office space. We did look at all the options and the cost, and based on the discussion with the board, gave approval to make any adjustments necessary up to the $8,000 mark. We are moving forward with moving the trustee meeting room to the basement of 61, and modifying that room as we discussed as one of the options that were brought up at the work session. That project is designed to begin, or not designed, scheduled to begin right after your very next trustee meeting. That's when the contractor can start. So, and our goal is to have the room completely finished and modified, ready to go by the joint meeting. That's gonna take place on the 30th now.
And will they be doing this room, modifying?
And then this room will be a
At the same time?
modification of office space and a small conference room, and then most of the wall will be taken up with the files and current equipment that's located at the office.
It will be done concurrently then?
Yes.
Okay, and that should be done by June 30th also?
I don't know about June 30th. Your room is to be scheduled
Right.
to be done then. This may take a little longer,
Okay.
depending on when they run into.
On the, we approved 3 seasonal employees, correct?
Correct.
Okay, only 1 started of the 3?
One started, one turned down a position to take another one.
Okay.
And the other one starts June 1st.
Okay, but you're still gonna get the,
Still gonna get two.
you're still gonna end up with 2, okay. And so are you gonna come back to us for a third, or you're gonna work with the 2?
Nah, just like
Okay,
that. I'm just
All
gonna
right.
go with what I got.
makes sense, okay. Any other questions for roads?
Thank you, board. Next item is on page 33 is the fire department's biweekly report. I will pass on to the board that the open houses were very successful. Parking was difficult because of the amount of people that showed up at both Station 63 and Station 64 on the Tuesday and Thursday of last week. I did get one comment that they did see the notification on the LED. I don't know if the board had an opportunity to wait at the intersection to see it, but it was advertised for both nights.
I think when we have open houses at least 63, if somehow they indicate that there's parking in the school board building, so there's a lot of parking available, and just walk through the park, and it's very close by. I don't know what the option is at 64. There's not a whole lot of places where you can go to. But 63s, you do have that option. And maybe if we have anything at 62 in the evening and Knollwood is closed, maybe we can deal with something with them that they allow us to use their parking lot.
Yeah, we generally don't hold public events there because of that. Access is just too difficult.
Yeah.
We don't want to encourage pedestrians to cross lanes either.
On your activity summary, is there anything that you need to point out to us as an awareness or something that needs to be monitored?
Not at this point, no, sir.
Is Chief Easter gonna be working with the right, Pat? On the
Yes.
chapter?
Yeah, they are in the process of developing that comp plan for the tattoo at this point.
Are they gonna use our communications unit over there?
I have no idea what resources they'll be using. My guess is probably not. My guess is they'll use mostly base resources. Base has the same or better than what we have for most options.
Any other questions, fire related?
Thank you, board. That's all I have.
All right. Legal advisor,
Nothing.
trustees, Ms. Graff, Mr. Paxson, Ms. Aaron's.
Nothing.
There were no legal invoices this time?
I did submit the one that was in question last week for modification. They want to make that change and send it back to us. I have not received anything as of
Okay.
today.
All right, so we had, then we need a motion essentially to go into executive session under 121.22 G5 and 121.22 G3, correct?
I so move, And do you need what G5 was, consider matters under federal,
To be kept
to
confidential.
be kept confidential under federal law? And G3,
Conferences with attorneys for the public body concerning disputes involving the public body that are subject to pending or imminent court action.
I so moved.
Great teamwork.
Second.
Ms. Grouch,
Yes?
Mr. Paxton,
Yes.
Mr. Kretz,
Yes.